The following stream contains mature content and subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to McStabber Studios. This is our storyteller panel here tonight. It's storytellers, dungeon masters, game masters, a little bit of everything. I am, of course, Shanky McStabber. And to start off, we're going to go around and have this panel introduce themselves and give a little bit about their own history of role-playing games. Since I'm first, I'm going to go right into it. I've been gaming since 1981. I ran my first Dungeons & Dragons game in 81 at the age of 6. I've played from 81 to 99. Pretty much you name a game, I played it in that period of time. I stopped role-playing games in 99 and took a 20-year break and then came back in 2019 where I started up a Vampire Chronicle for the first time in 20 years. And 4 months later, we were streaming it, and here we are. There's my background in it. And now we're going to go around the table.
All right. I'm Devin, also known as Lady Merowith, and I have been a dungeon master, game master since the mid 2000s-ish, and a storyteller for the past year-ish and some change for home games with friends.
And I'm Rylyn Dare, also known as Mama McStabber in Twitch chat. I am wife to Shanky McStabber up above me. And I'm the reason he started that vampire game in 2019, because I said, I want to play that after seeing a few streams of it. And I basically got my start with role play there. I actually ran my first game as a game master. I've not run any World of Darkness games yet, so I don't consider myself a storyteller, but I've run some Powered by the Apocalypse system games. I started in October of last year. My very first game I ran was actually a live stream of it for charity, and I've done live stream gaming since.
And I'm Ravinia, also known as Nikki. I've been playing in role-play games since I was like 6, which was like mid-90s. And then I took the jump to be a GM a few years later when nobody was around to GM for me anymore. So someone's got to stand up and do it. And from there, it's just constantly been a spiral. There were lulls on occasion. But mainly I've done World of Darkness, I've done Pathfinder, I've done Rifts, which a lot of people know that system. I'm not very shy about trying a system though, but yeah, all in good fun.
And hi, I'm Maddox, sometimes known as Riley, and my role-playing experience, well, it started when a friend brought his D&D books to class one day in middle school, and I just went downhill from there. But I didn't actually run my first game until about end of my freshman or like beginning of my sophomore year at high school, and I primarily have just run D&D. I have obsessed over the World of Darkness without actually ever playing in a table game or running one. And then I ran a little bit of the Fate Core book, and that is a very, theme adaptive RPG. So genre I don't have, but limited experience definitely.
I'm Mickey Bear. Gaming experience starts for me around about 93. Was when I started playing D&D. Got into World of Darkness very soon after that. I can't remember exactly when, but it was right around first edition, stuff like that. Pathfinder, again D&D. Started out in AD&D, got into third edition 3.5. Pathfinder. I did play a game of 4th edition D&D, which we don't talk about 4th edition D&D. A lot of World of Darkness, Star Wars West End Games, as well as the Saga Edition Star Wars. I ran a game of that for about 3.5, almost 4 years. And then I ran a Discord server for about a year and a half before I just burnt out on it. Basically, I was pretty much the only one running it, and we played every day for about a year and a half. So yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Ravnos Archon. You can call me Will, though. I've been role-playing since about the mid-90s in high school when I came across the West End game of Star Wars with that blue book and Darth Vader on the cover. So I didn't come into it with D&D like a lot of people did. I came into it the wrong way around. I got Star Wars and I went right into White Wolf, and that just ruined me forever. I came into D&D at 3rd edition, and it has been a staple in my life ever since. But I think Star Wars has definitely been one that I've gone to religiously, and some of the other systems that I love has always been AEG's Roll and Keep system for Legend of the Five Rings, which I think is damn near perfect. But I've been a storyteller for the entirety of that because nobody wanted to be the storyteller for our group. So that's just been the niche that I filled, and I've enjoyed it ever since.
And as everyone can see, we've got different skill levels, different experience doing this, different amount of time. The first thing we're also going to go around now and talk about primarily where we run our games. Personally, I came back after 20 years. I ran table games prior because that's all there was. But other than that brief few months, I no longer run table games. All my games are solely streamed format. So I don't do any Zoom offline games. I don't do any kind of home games. All of the games I run now are streamed only as a format. And that's just my own personal thing. And that's where the other part of the experience, we've got people with different experience here, but we've also got people who are used to running games in a different format. So now we'll go around one more time. We're going to start in reverse order. We're going to start with Ravnos Archon and go back around that direction. So everyone can talk about what type of games, where they run them, those kind of things.
I was used to running tabletop games like with people gathered, and things changed. So now I primarily run mostly streamed games. I do run the occasional kind of D&D game on the side for just a couple of friends, but everything has become just streamed for me.
Mickey?
As previously stated, before the current situation in which we find ourselves, it was exclusively table run games. And then when I discovered Discord, well, that's how I met Shanky and Relin was through a Discord game. I came to that party late, but then I saw that Discord gaming, you could do some fairly narrative heavy gaming that way, and enjoyed that. And that's when I started up my own Discord server. And but I've got a fairly good balance between play by post as well as running table games. And now I'm just now getting into stream games, and there are some very big differences, but also many more similarities.
Yeah. And we're going to go into some of those differences because that's one of the big things I want to talk about here is that a lot of people don't understand the different formats and how it changes how you're doing anything. Now we're going to go to Maddox now.
I am entirely table games. I have never streamed anything. The fact that I am joining these weirdos for a stream is still a little weird. But I don't have any expectation on like any sort of theme that I would run or like certain structures I would give a game. I do my best to always fit myself as best I can to the players at the table and the characters they have made. So I do my best to give them the stories they're asking for, while still also being able to traumatize them consensually.
Consensually, yes. Ravinia?
Well, I've done mainly tabletop games for a really long time. I did some forum-based RPs back in the day. It's been a while since I've thought about that, but yeah, I moderated that stuff. We had to make the transition from playing in person to playing online due to COVID, the pandemic, and everything like that. And there are some distinctive differences. And then we get into streaming, and that's a whole nother world, in my opinion.
From Berlin.
Okay. So as far as running games, I have exclusively run stream games. My first two, which so far I've run two, and I'm about to, as you saw in the previews, run a third game of now Monster Hearts, but I ran 2 games of Bluebeard's Bride, and both of those were run live. The Monster Hearts will actually be done like Shanky does his and pre-recorded and then streamed. So that's going to be slightly different experience for me because I'm learning all the back end tech stuff that goes into that. And oh my gosh. But as far as playing, I have played table briefly when Shanky ran our DC Chronicle as a table game before we started streaming it. And then I played a few games of Vampire and Werewolf offline, off stream, but online through Zoom.
Which is, again, how we met Mickey Bear, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Played with us on our anniversary night
Yes,
one
he
night.
did.
For an online game. Devin?
I pretty much a table runner is what I do. The very first tabletop anything I played was D&D 3.5. Which for your first experiences, that's interesting, especially if you don't like details. But then right after that, I GM'd my first game with Dungeon World, that system. And then since then, I've been D&D 5th edition, and then recently Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. Just basically with friends. I've done some mixed groups before. And my style tends to be very, very heavy RP. So even in a system like D&D that's like really crunchy and very math heavy, I'm like, no, screw that. We might have a session that we don't roll at all. That's pretty much my style. But lots of homebrew. I'll just pick a system and then build something for it around that. So that's kind of what I do.
We definitely have a mix of people who've done all kinds of different formats, which is great because, as it's been brought up a few times, there's a definite different way for each of these game types. And that's one of the questions I'm having. First, for those who have moderated or been part of the Discord and play-by-post style, there's, from my own view, and I want to get your opinions on that, it's a lot, in terms of time commitment and difficulty, it's actually much more difficult than the standard game from the way I see it, is because it's always on. They are always role-playing at any hour of the night, and things are going on, and you have to look at things differently when you run it like that. And so for those that go around the table, we'll go around and talk to those that have done the Discord first, because that's a big one I want to bring up right from the beginning, because I know a number of our viewers have done play-by-post. Some of them are still in play-by-post games. And it's definitely a whole different format when you play it that way. So I know Devin doesn't do them. Relin, we played it briefly, Relin and I, and it was always on.
Not even really.
Yeah.
we were in the Discord server for it, but we weren't actively
couldn't
playing.
keep up.
Yeah.
Couldn't keep up. Ravinia, you've dealt with that, right?
A little bit. It was mainly forums instead of Discord.
Right, play-by-post.
Yeah. Crazy. It's just crazy. Things can be going on, and then certain people will just leave for months, which will leave a storyline absolutely stagnant, and frustration and resentment builds up from that stuff. I see Mickey there face palming because I think he understands exactly what I'm talking about. Or suddenly someone's active and there was a scene that they had discussed that needed, and that they were waiting for this person to get on, and then it just starts happening rapid fire, and then you never see that person again. Or there are just games that just stop because, the moderator, the storyteller, whoever's supposed to be helping guide it, just burns out and just leaves without saying anything. And it's just absolute chaos. If it's done right, it's great, but it's constantly on, and there are way too many factors, I honestly feel like, for it to be done effectively.
I'd like to interject really quick. When you mentioned forums, that actually triggered a memory. Oh my gosh, I'm going to date myself here because Mama's birthday's tomorrow and I'm old. But
No, she's not.
There was, oh my gosh, so long ago, this web-based like role play game going on. It was called, I think it was like Pi Ramses or something like that. It was an ancient Egyptian setting, and you basically role played out being in this setting. And I remember, yeah, because it was similar to like a forum type BBS type stuff. And oh my gosh, that was insanity. It was insanity. You just made me have a flashback that I'd completely suppressed. All right, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, running a Discord server, there's a lot of very unique challenges, and if you can manage the logistics of it, they are very rewarding challenges. But eventually, the pace and the especially if you're the one who's generating all the plot lines and storylines and moderating all the dice rolls and being the key person interacting with each individual player. And I tried to keep my server small. Like, it was a small server. It wasn't like 100 people. It was, I capped out around 20. Like, I refused to have more than 20 people. But what I wanted was something like a persistent world that you could role play in, and that's really was the beginning and end statement of it. I had it was a World of Dark, a V5 vampire game set in Kansas City, and the metro, if you will, because the metro has a population of around 2 million people, whereas Kansas City, Missouri, doesn't have that many. And so you have a very large area, but it also has a very good centralized urban area for you to play around in, and there's a lot of culture and interesting stories to be told there. A lot of pretty robust mob history in Kansas City and things like that. So you got a lot of interesting little plot lines you can play with. There's a massive underground complex that has restaurants and bars and things in it that you can play with. Really fascinating stuff. And I just wanted, a lot of play-by-post servers. They do a one night in game is equal to 1 week out of game. So every Monday you would get your 1 XP for that week and move on. I did 3 out of game nights was 1 in game night, so it was a lot faster pace. And because it was so small, I was able to institute the rule of, if you're not active, the world is still going to go on around you regardless of your participation or not. And if you were going to be apathetic, then apathy was going to bite you in the ass, and that happened to quite a few people. I ended up with a solid group of about 7 to 10 players that played fairly consistently, and then the other half, got in when they could, because especially considering the fact that the bulk of this time was during COVID at its height, people needed that escape, and I was happy to provide it, and it was a stress relief for me because it gave me something to focus on, other than all that stuff. And one of the biggest challenges, especially in the way I was doing, because I think I was doing something rather unique in that I was running actual events every couple of weeks where there would be, an Elysium, or a Sabbat pack would roll through, or one of the big plot lines of my game was the Bali had come to the city. And I'll get into how I made that work for V5 later. But it was a fairly robust plot line that involved a lot of the players, and then at the end of it, we had this big, massive sort of showdown between everyone that was available and all of my NPCs. And oh boy, doing that over text, it was gives whole new meaning to the term keyboard warrior. I'll tell you that much. Jeez, I'm crow. Because I was beating on my keyboard like it owed me money.
That's a common statement in this house, actually.
Because I do type heavy-handed. So.
It's like I feel that the play-by-post is one of the more challenging ones to run because it's always on. But you did touch on something there that it's also, in a lot of ways, it's if you get it going right and you get the right group doing it, it's very fulfilling to do it because it's always on. There's always stuff going on. You can see where the players are taking their stories and running with them without the breaks, without, going a week between games, 2 weeks, whatever your schedule is. And there is advantages to that. And there's storylines that would be very difficult to do in a different kind of format that are very tough to do at a table game or a streamed game.
Yeah,
So-
I wasn't restricted by the only I don't want to say restricted by, but the only sort of guidelines I had as far as what my content could be was my players' consent. I was always very careful about, I wouldn't even approach lines. If it was a yellow, I wouldn't go near it typically, unless I had a very in-depth conversation. And I believe I said something on a previous stream about, if I don't feel like I can give a particular topic the respect it deserves, I won't try and do it. And that was also something that informed my storytelling decisions.
So we're going to go over to the table game things. We'll start with Devin on it. What do you see the big challenges with a table game? Because we've seen the challenges and the advantages. So we'll go around with the table gamers because I don't consider myself, I was gone 20 years. I don't run table games anymore. I don't have the experience, especially now. So we'll go around and talk about what do you feel the challenges were and some of the advantages maybe that you see in that style of game.
Well, I'm sure everyone knows the meme about, you have my sword, my bow, and Tuesday doesn't work for me. That's when I was doing in-person games, which switching over to digital had really nothing to do with COVID because it was before that because all my friends are a long ways away. But scheduling was always a big problem, especially with people with busy lives or having a lot going on. And also, I would say, similarly to some with the play-by-post, but less logistically, it's just interpersonal things, the table dynamic with the people there, because you might have a group of people that you thought we were all friends, but then something outside of the game is starting to influence people's relationship to each other, or something happens between two of the other people in their own private lives, and then that starts to and then that's what kills games. So I would say those are probably the two biggest challenges, but also managing people's styles, because everybody kind of has a different style, what they're looking for in a game. Like I said, my DM style, my storyteller style tends to be very, very heavy RP, which I try to let people know when they're like, hey, you should run a game for us. It's like, yeah, but you're going to be RPing all the time, because if we're just going to be doing dungeon crawl stuff, that's not interesting to me. So trying to find a group that jives with that, and you can have a mix. Like, it's not necessarily like, oh, we never want to do anything in combat because combat happens, or something happens where you're going to be a little bit more mechanics heavy depending on what system you're running. But trying to find that balance, I think, is in pre the game, but then also sometimes in the middle of the game, you might find out, oh, this person is really interested in this aspect of the game, but nobody else is. And okay, how do we do this without killing the game? Especially if you're doing a long form campaign. I think it's maybe a little easier if you're like a limited series, something where it's like, oh, we're going to be 10 sessions or 3 months or something. And that's what and then boom, and then we're done. It's like, cause then you could go, okay, we're done. Yay. As opposed to my current D&D game has been running for nigh on 2.5 years. They're reaching the end of the story, but I mean, that's a long time. If you have interpersonal problems in the middle of that, it's scary. And then, of course, as a storyteller, you're sad because then you're like, oh, they didn't get to see all of the later game stuff because things fell apart. But I mean, there's a lot of good things about it. But I'd say that, that's one of the challenges. And of course, one of the good things about a table game is if you don't have friends that live long distance, you can all sit around a table together and play, which is really great. And you can kind of, engage with people that way and have a lot of fun, make it a social gathering at the same time you play.
Oh, that was one thing that was nice when we were doing Vampire briefly as a table, was the friends coming over and playing it. But for us, we found we didn't get to play with new people.
Yeah.
And we like playing with new people. And that's, I'll go into that in a minute. That's part of that. I know Verlyn doesn't really do much table game. I don't think she's going to count that, but we'll go to Ravinia then.
Oh, table games are like my bread and butter, but like Devin has said, scheduling. Oh my God, the scheduling. And then you run into the people that seem like they're committed and then they don't show up and they don't tell you. I literally had someone, I was calling and texting them being like, where are you? It's 30 minutes past game time. And he's on Twitch streaming, starting a stream.
Wow.
So I actually hopped into his Twitch chat and I was like, hey. And all of a sudden the stream stopped.
We're only guilty for making Devin a little late to her games on Friday. Not, we're not starting her in a stream.
Yeah, and it was one of those things. And I worked with this person. So I saw him like the next day and I'm like, what happened? And he just kind of tried to brush it off. It was a whole thing. but that's the thing, is the communication and having a balanced table, having a table where everybody is kind of jiving, and having that interpersonal dynamic is always tricky because something's always going to happen. I had a person that wanted to play in my games and he wanted his wife to sit on the table. Well, sit on the couch and watch Netflix because there was concern. There was this weird concern that he was coming over for some sort of shenanigans.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about that. And I'm very role play heavy DM. I do try and sprinkle in the combat. I do the milestone leveling, which some people love it, some people hate it. It just depends on who you're dealing with. But yeah, there's sometimes where it happens to where, you think this person's going to fit really well at the table and they're really into wargaming. Even though you had told them 32 times, I role play heavy, blah, blah, blah. And they're just sitting there staring you down while this whole role play thing is going on, rolling their eyes. And I'm like, I just want to punch you in the face right now. Told you. But yeah, it's scheduling, tables, inter-party relationships, the works.
At a game, drama always sucks, don't it?
Drama, yes.
Maddox?
Well, here, just to say it because it feels like the echo chamber needs a little bit of substance. Scheduling, for the love of God. Anyways, now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'll try to provide a different blessing / curse in the casual nature of table type games. Because here, let's get to the rough stuff first. Someone is, I'll use D&D since it's what I played the most. Someone's taking their turn for whatever reason in combat, and then they finish their turn, but then, they're the person who gets up, goes and gets a drink and all that stuff, and that's fine. You've finished your turn, whatever. But still hoping that as you're running the game, you're like, okay, they're going to get a drink. Please do not come back and not have even the slightest clue what's going on. Please be listening a little bit from the kitchen. Please just holding your players' attention when there is no set of stay in your seat. Don't, mute yourself when you're not talking, any sort of stream conduct. There's none of that. I'm fortunate enough to have any gaming group I've played with not be distracted assholes all the time. But I know plenty of my friends or other just random people I've met at conventions and stuff where they have said, how do you keep your players' attention? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. My players are kind and respect me.
That's definitely
But-
something I'm about to touch on with the streamed format. You can be rest assured.
But Ravenous
that-
Archon also. Oh, sorry, Maddox, please finish.
It's just a quick thought. And then on the other side of it, because it is so casual, sometimes the DM's like, God, this combat's been going on for a while. Hey, everyone, I know that we're in the middle of a fight, but break, please. And you can just do that. Or people are like, you're starting to see people fade out and fall asleep, and you're like, what time is it? Oh, crap, guys, we're ending. What? We're in the middle of a fight. No, I don't care. I'll remember where everything is. Just, we're ending. It's late. And
Flexibility.
you can really play with your time when you don't have outside expectation aside from the people at your table. And that's for Zoom games as well as in-person tabletop stuff.
Yeah, because I consider
So-
Zoom the same as tabletop, especially during COVID, because a lot of people don't have games in their house anymore, but they're doing it on Zoom with the same people they were probably playing with in their house. For those that live close.
So scheduling, and then also just the casual flexibility that you can have in the game itself. So
Yeah, the more people you have at the table, the more you're juggling schedules, and it just depends on how much of a circus you want when you build your team. I had the fortune of being a game store manager, and I was in charge of the Adventurers League, so I got to play and stretch my DMing skills every week on Wednesdays. And I had one group of players that would always want to just come to my table. And so I kind of built a friendship out of that, and we still play even to this day over Discord. But it is one of those things where it's like there's something about the camaraderie, something instant about the interactions at the table. I think there's a level that you can't really get from Zoom or Discord with a tabletop game because you're right there. There's a moment where if you reach out and grab one of your players by the forearm to drive a point home like that, you can't do over Zoom or Discord. There is one game of a podcast that I was doing where I was introducing 4 girls to Dungeons and Dragons, and we had one of their friends who was a Dungeons and Dragons player already as a ringer, and I had this creepy kid called the King in White, as a reference to Call of Cthulhu, who just was like alabaster white himself, but he had this cloak of stained glass that would shift as he moved. And he just had this creepy voice. And I remember just leaning over to the 2 people, to the 2 players who were in the room with him. And I was just like, hi. And as I leaned in, they leaned back. And that's something you don't get with Zoom or Discord. But they're different animals. You have to adjust.
That's a very valid point, though, is that the physicality of playing at a table is definitely different.
It enhances that shared experience a bit.
Yeah, because you can lean in or lean back, or you can use your whole body as part of the role-playing experience to convey things that on a streamed format probably wouldn't come out as well. I'm going to wait to go last on the streamed format stuff because I have a lot to say, and I don't want to take everyone's statements because I've been doing streamed for a while. But I know Devin hasn't run a streamed game. She's played in streamed games. She may have some comments that she wants to give, and then we'll go around the table again for those that have comments on what they see about a streamed game, because I think everyone hears at least, well, Maddox is about to start his first streamed game. Mm-hmm.
I gotcha.
Come to the
Yeah,
club, man.
She sunk her claws into you, and now you'll just never be able to get out, Maddox. I'm sorry.
Do you
It's
have
over.
any idea how expensive it is to go to the hospital for someone scratching you as they're grabbing you for a role-playing game, Relin? I haven't
She's
been
a
to the
nurse.
hospital
As a
in
nurse,
years.
yes, I do. I know what that charge master looks like.
Mhm.
My goodness.
So we'll start with Devin to give
Right.
anything she says on the streamed format, and we'll go around because I think
Yeah.
everyone here, even Maddox, may have some opinions now that he's done pre-recording for session 0 to get a feel for it.
Yeah, streamed games. Yeah, haven't run a streamed game. Seems like a lot of work in a lot of different ways. But the format is interesting because some of the etiquette, like again, like Maddox brought up the casualness of a tabled game and just kind of how it's loosey goosey. But a streamed game, you don't really get as much of that. It can become absolute chaos if you have too much of that casualness or table talk rather. But you can also like craft it. I mean, obviously, I can only speak to the one that I've played in, but I mean, Windy City After Dark is crafted very much for the narrative experience and allowing the players to role play their characters and to interact with one another and the story and the world around them. And that's the experience that you're experiencing, but also as a viewer that you get is like that very crafted, like, this is what we're doing. There's also a little bit more planning, I think, that goes into it than necessarily would go into a tabletop one. For example, a peek behind the curtain for Windy City is often, Shank, you'll be like, okay, what's everyone doing? And if we don't have anything, then the stuff gets thrown at us. But sometimes, everyone's like, okay, yeah, I've been thinking about this. Like, this is a scene, this is a scene, this is a scene. And it's like you're crafting like an actual like show, or if it were written out, it would be like a book. It's like, here's the things, here's how they go, here's the POV. There's a little bit more of that going in rather than kind of everyone is their own little world. It's like everybody's now part of a single world rather than their own little orbiting the DM, if you will.
That makes sense because it's a streamed format. And yes, we're enjoying playing the game. We're playing the game. It's not scripted, but you also want to make sure that every scene that you're showing is something the viewers would want to watch because you're doing it for like a TV show format in a lot of ways, especially the way I run them, because we run seasons, we set episodes. And so now we'll move to Verlyn, let her.
Well, first I want to basically kind of bounce off of what Devin just said with the, the planning and stuff. I will say my husband is a great improv storyteller. He really is. He doesn't really pre-plan much of anything. But he is very good at bouncing off of plans that players bring to the table to develop their character stories or group stories of the characters, and just rolling with it and letting things just naturally, organically develop throughout the story. And it's brilliant. But he does actually encourage us players to plot. He really does. He wants us to plot out story hooks and story threads and tie-ins to other characters and stuff like that. He wants us to bring our stories to the table because the way he sees it is it's our story. He's just helping us tell it. So
we're going to go into that also because I think that's another question we're going to go around the table. Let's talk about each person's style because I think everyone here has a slightly, at least in some way, different style of running a game.
But let me go into, because I run completely different games, completely different. I do not run long-standing campaigns. I do not run chronicles. I don't do that. I run one-shots and soon to be my first mini-series. It's going to be, I anticipate 3 episodes. So basically, I do very short-form games, mainly because I'm new, still getting my feet wet in this stuff. And I kind of dove into the deep end and decided I was going to either sink or swim by doing it live streaming. So I basically decided that I would make it as easy as possible on me by finding a simplistic system that is narrative based, because I do enjoy narrative gaming. I like a good damn story, and I like to tell a good damn story and read a good damn story and see a good damn story. So I like so far I've led towards Powered by the Apocalypse. I've actually been looking into other systems that are similar with the simplistic die rolls, very infrequent die rolls, mostly player narrative driven stories with the games. And so I basically started with that because it has very simplistic rules. I didn't have to memorize a whole bunch of charts. I didn't have to memorize a whole bunch of lines of rules and minutia. I just got to, review it with my players and say, okay, these are, the 10 rules of the game, and we're going to just improv the hell out of this and have fun. But yeah, but as far as like, what I find for streaming for my own games, I took some cues because of how my husband has done things with casting players for our games and stuff like that. The McStabber group posts all our casting calls for players in our Discord. And I decided that I would basically take some cues from him. I'm not as strict on audio, visual, stuff like that. Mainly if I can see you and hear you, you're good to go. But it's one of those things that I do make sure that I do the consent forms. I actually screen players based on those consent forms. I try to make sure everyone is generally on the same page so that we can have a shared experience that nobody triggers each other. So I do that. And I also look for certain personalities to try to get a table that will mesh well. I did it with both my Bluebeards games and also did it with now Monster Hearts. And you will see soon what the table I crafted came out of this. And it's going to just be chaos and wonderful and glorious. It's going to be amazing. But it basically, you know, that's something with streaming. You have to not only consider the table dynamic as if you would in a home game, you have to consider how is that table dynamic going to play out on a stream, because you need players that are engaged. And I mean, not everyone is really outgoing, and that's fine. You can have some more subdued, more introverted players, but you've got to make sure you have at least one other player at the table that is more extroverted, more supportive, and will pull that player into scenes so that they get a chance to shine. I call that proactive role-playing type. And that I always like to have, when I cast my games, I like to have at least one proactive player, if not multiple, because I want people to pull each other into scenes. So that's a consideration I have to do.
Okay, and I know, Nikki, you've played in a number of games now, especially here on McStabber Studios,
And she's
run
run
a game, no less. So
Yeah.
now we'll get your views on the streamed format as a format.
The best way to put it is it feels like there's a lot more structure. People actually, you know, you don't have that person that's going to be like, oh, I'm going to go get some snacks while everybody else is doing shit, because that, one, at the table level, that ruins role play. And two, everyone's here for a purpose. We're here to play a game, stream it live or record it and stream it out. And that's something I actually really love about stream games, is that structure is there. Everybody knows what we're here to do. We're going to have fun doing it. But it's just, it feels more organized. I guess there's like some weird stream etiquette that not everybody, it's one of those unwritten rule kind of things that just kind of happens when it's like, oh, people are going to be watching this. I guess it's transforming it from just playing around casually to a performance art almost, I guess. I'm trying to think. The way I pick people is it's more I talk to you, I see how you interact, just a generalized vibe, and I think that, hey, you're going to work with these people. Hey, it's going to be great. You know, obviously the consent form plays a very titular role in figuring out how I'm going to run the game, how I'm going to structure it, because I'm obviously going to avoid stuff that people don't want to see in the game. It's like, okay, they're not going to enjoy A, B, or C. Okay, those are ideas I can stash away for, you know, some other group that might be, you know, might have different cringe or trigger warnings and things like that. And I don't know how to describe this. It just feels like there's like a certain magic to doing it here on a stream versus at the table. I don't know what it is. It's just, it's
There's a pressure,
really fun.
But there's also
When it works well, it's like catching lightning in a bottle.
there's a pressure though about always being on your game as much as you can. But yeah, Maddox, you got your first stream game coming up, but you've also gone through the 2 Session Zero recordings as pre-streaming to get a feel for how it's the process. How do you feel about the streamed format?
Somewhat piggybacking off of Ravinia, consent is a lot more in depth for stream stuff, it seems to me, because with my, just gaming with my friends and stuff, it was like, hey, don't talk about this, it makes me uncomfortable. Cool. And that's as far as it ever went. Just a quick check-in. And so it's been interesting, filling out a form, discussing it with the other players, that it took at least like 20 minutes to get through all of our stuff. But I was like, wow, this is good to know. I would have done the same thing had I known even just half of that information, but it's good to have all of it. So yeah, especially for you guys, I'm not sure about other streams, but for you guys, it seems like consent is focused on a lot.
It is paramount for
And-
our games here on this stream.
And for all the table games I've run, because it's just my friends, I already kind of know what makes them uncomfortable and what lines I can cross with them, because they're not lines for them. But for getting strangers together to play an RPG, I can definitely see how those forums are a necessity, if nothing else.
Especially when you go back to some of the comments that Devin and Ravinia had said about the interpersonal relationships and drama that pops up. Those kind of things in a streamed game can mean the end of the stream. I mean, not just it can be the end of the stream as a whole. And to be frank, violating consent to players can be the end of a channel for good reason. We've moved past what it used to be in the 90s, and I'm thankful for that, because it was not safe gaming back in the 90s, and I admit that. And we've gone in a better direction. And that's why we take the consent so seriously, is because we don't want to see a return to, I'll be frank, what gave Vampire a bad name, because I mainly run Vampire now, and what gave Vampire a bad name in the 90s and early 2000s was exactly the lack of consent. And, the sheer amount of stuff they put in the rules that was just cringe as hell, just bad. Mickey?
Talking about my experience streaming so far. I think we were talking about this a little bit before, is, fidgeting and things like that. Movement attracts attention. Certain colors, certain things attract attention. And, if Devin is up there freaking ripping everybody's heart out as Eleanor, friggin' doing what she does, and I'm down here going, "Ooh, look at me! I'm an asshole." So it is 100% what you are mindful of, and that leads into the discussion about consent as well. And consent is especially in a World of Darkness game, or any other sort of dark theme game, or noir game, or Call of Cthulhu, or things like that, because there's things that I am fine with, there's things that I am not fine with. When you're storytelling, your job is to, one of your jobs is to push boundaries, but not just completely obliterate them. Horror and horror games, shit's supposed to be scary, but there's a difference between. I think I said this before again on a previous stream, and in Bram Stoker's, or not Bram Stoker's, in the Dracula with Bela Lugosi, not a single drop of blood was shown. And nowadays you've got your Eli Ross and your Saws and your Jigs, all that other junk, and it's just like, I don't find that scary. I find it repulsive, because that's not good to me. If you like it, that's your thing. Go forth and prosper. For me, it's not compelling storytelling. I'd rather, something be left to the imagination.
And that actually was something somebody had asked before of me about when Jonathan left Chicago, Windy City, when his character was killed. Somebody had asked why I faded to black, showing his end. And that was because sometimes in a streamed game, my view is it's not always what you show in a streamed game. sometimes it's what you don't show in the stream game that makes it better. And in this particular case, it was the fade to black. Let the viewers come to a conclusion about, holy hell, what happened. And then, of course, we showed some more details an episode or two later. But at the time, we faded to black because good horror isn't always everything you're seeing. It's what you think is happening, whether it is or not. And streamed format, I take that very seriously in my games.
And when it comes to the ability to cast your games, essentially, you have the opportunity to get people who have similar consent lines, and then Relin did it masterfully in her Monster Heart Session 0. She's like, okay, here's what your lines are, and then here's what like Twitch TOS is, and then so we're going to use these things as our vanguard, our guiding light, and that's what we're going to follow through this twisty little corridor. And it's actually freeing in a lot of ways. It's not, again, I didn't want to use the word restricted because it wasn't accurate. It's freeing in a lot of ways because if you know where your left and right range fans are, you can then explore in detail everything in between. And it's in the process of that exploration that great stories are told.
And you definitely seem to get better consent forms. I know a lot of people, they follow them in conventions and table games, but from my own experience, streamed games, consent forms go pretty damn in depth and then are talked about as well on top of what's filled in because...
Yeah, as Maddox said, when I was doing my session 0 with my Monster Hearts cast, I mean, that was 20 minutes of discussion on consent and boundaries and hard stops and what we need to discuss prior and all that.
The only other thing I want to say before we move on to Will is there was some confusion. I forget what it was about, but there was some confusion about what exactly something meant. And then we had another 20-minute discussion about what that specifically meant.
Mm-hmm.
And we came to a consensus about what it meant. And communication is never going to hurt you.
Collaboration. It's a beautiful thing.
Okay. Ravenous Archon? Will? Because it says it right in his name.
Yeah. I'm fortunate in that I went to school for theater with a focus in lighting design. So I had a relative pool of actors just clamoring at the bit to do anything. And so some of them were geeks or some of them were kind of like little nerds just waiting to be watered and kind of flourish. And so I've kind of cheated in assembling a group of people for each of my games that are like, there's veterans, but there's also some new blood in each of the casts that don't know the system, don't know the game entirely. And it's been fun kind of watching their growth as these kind of veterans of the games kind of show them where the railroad is. 'Cause in one stream I had one of my players just being a huge dick, just kind of being crude and just being completely uncontrollable. And I wasn't about to like set down any rules or things like that. I was just like, the game's going to handle you. You are going to have to deal with the repercussions of your actions. And that's a big thing that happens on McStabber Studios. So that's why I was like, you can do whatever you want. You can wear that captain's hat on that fucking thing in front of everyone. I don't care. And the second the other shoe dropped, she just wasn't ready for it. And it was fun to see the character growth and now how they have kind of hit that wall and now have to find a way to navigate the new kind of corral that they've put themselves in. But streaming's been an up and down. Like you guys found your footing. It's been an interesting kind of journey to get into. I've always hated the sound of my voice, but there are people that really enjoy it. And so getting to kind of tell a story and not have people cringe at the sound of my voice is kind of the best reward I've gotten from streaming games.
I fucking love the sound of your voice, so I don't know what the problem
I
is.
don't.
I
It's
love
so
you too.
smooth.
But everyone, as
I sympathize.
me and Devin have actually had talks about, we can tell you what all our opinions for your anxiety, but your anxiety is going to ignore us and think what it wants to think anyway.
And that is probably one of the biggest things that I actually neglected to mention with streaming, especially since I stream one shots and I'm relatively new. One of the biggest hurdles with streaming games is getting over that anxiety, because it will eat you alive if you let it.
I still have it.
Yeah. And you know, but you've gotten past it enough that you can actually record and run a game. But, you know, some people actually become crippled by it and never and fail, and they have failure to launch because of it. But basically, you have to realize that you're doing this for fun and that people are not going to judge you as harshly as you judge yourself.
You'll always be your own worst critic. for
Right.
sure.
You are your own worst critic. So tell the liar in your head to shut the fuck up and move forward. One foot in front of the other, one step at a time. Because that anxiety, I mean, it affects storytellers. It affected me. I was panicking quite a bit before my first Bluebeard stream. I'm not going to lie. It affects players, especially those who are brand new to streaming a role play game. It affects everybody in a stream game. And even some that are veterans doing the stream game still get the jitters and nerves before it. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I'm pretty solid with a pre-recorded one. When I'm doing a live, I get a little anxious right before going live. Like I got a little anxious even today. I was like ready an hour before I needed to be. But you know, but you know, but that is something that everybody experiences to some degree. Some get imposter syndrome. Some just get the fear of failure. You know, it's not that they feel like they're an imposter. They just fear that they fear they're going to fall on their face. And, you know, and so you just got to learn to make that voice softer and put it in the back of your mind and just move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let Will, anything else you want to add to it? You want to finish? Got more to say?
No, and I think everybody's hit the nail on the head with their own hammer, and we've built a barn here of what streaming is.
Because for me, well, I'll tell you, a Discord run game or play by post, that is incredibly complex and difficult to do because of the always on nature. The hardest part for me streaming was honestly the tech. There's a lot that goes into the tech side of things that if you want to put, I mean, you don't have to have, it's not a matter of how much money you spend on tech. It's not a matter of what tech you're using. It's learning how to use the tech you have to the best ability you can. And there's a lot of work involved in that there's no guides. There's no one that'll help you. And a lot of channels I've learned, they seem to think that the way they do this and the tech side of it and the back end is some sort of secret that if they tell anybody about it, it's giving something up from the channel. And obviously for those that know me and know Verlin and I, we don't believe in that. We try to help everyone we can with their back end and figure out how to set things up. But the tech is one of the hardest things about doing it. But one thing I love about the stream format and why I stopped running a table game is what several people have brought up. There's a casualness that comes with a table game among friends, even, a Zoom or whatever, that to me, it detracts some from the kind of stories I like to tell. You'll notice if it's a Shanky run game, there's no out of character talk until we go to break or we're going at the end of an episode or sometimes at the very start of the episode. But once you get into the meat of the game, we're in character and we stay in character as much as we can. We're human. There's slips, but we generally stay in character, and it's that seriousness that is brought to the table that I feel puts on the best kind of game to run. And because of our extensive casting call method, we can do, as several people brought up, Roland and Ravinia, about looking at who's at the table and making sure everyone's going to fit. Because like for Windy City, we had 32 applicants, and we had people go through 3 rounds of interviews and auditions
really.
with improv scenes. And then a final one was a table test to make sure that you got the right table dynamic for what we're trying to do. And there's a certain seriousness that I found goes with anyone who goes through that, they're not just, I feel like playing a game, I'll play a game. You're going through that many rounds of interviews. You're serious about wanting to be part of what we're doing. And because we do a season format, you have 10 episodes and then you have a break. That right there also allows the people to understand that when you agree to join a Shanky game, you've got a commitment. And the commitment is 10 weeks or whatever, 3 weeks if it's a mini series, whatever it is, you have a commitment to make it, if at all possible. Yes, we're adults. Shit happens. Emergencies happen. Sometimes you can't avoid it. But there's a commitment that you're going to be there for the 10 weeks. And if you need to schedule things, you'll know when the schedule ends that you can go and take care of it because you've got these breaks that we load into it. Windy City, they went into Windy City knowing 10 episodes and then a break, and then 10 episodes and then a break. So they can do things on these nights that we're recording. And the big thing to decide for a streamed format is recording versus live. And there are advantages to both. Some people I've learned don't like the idea of watching a recorded stream because they feel in some way it's not authentic. And I will tell you, a Shanky Run game, we do not edit out what happens. The only time we cut and edit anything in the middle of an episode is when there's a massive tech problem, which goes back to the tech side of it. I don't want you to see when a person drops off and we're sitting around for 5 minutes waiting to finish a scene because they've lost internet connection. The viewers don't need to see that if you don't have to, because that breaks the mood. It breaks the scene for the viewers, the enjoyment. So by recording, I can cut that section out, and I do.
And the same will apply to my Monster Hearts game that I'm doing the pre-recording. The actual content will not be altered in any way. The only issue will be that if something happens where someone gets, pulls an X card or something like that, I will stop recording for that. Or if there's a tech issue, I may have to edit the final recording to fix a tech issue.
That's another thing that when you're playing a dark game, Vampire, Wraith, having the option where we could stop recording if things got too intense for the players and get our table check to do, make sure everyone's okay, to deal with the bleed without the viewers getting constant breaks. And while if it's live, you'll get constant breaks and some people don't mind it, it interrupts the flow of the game.
It does.
And I try to avoid that. And on the flip side of recording, there's one big advantage that I think even the Windy City cast has grown to appreciate, and that is when it airs, the cast is there to watch it with the viewers, which means in a normal streamed game, you don't get much chance to interact with the people that are enjoying the show. But when you're watching it recorded like we do it for Windy City and Wraith, you can interact with the viewers as the scene airs and get real feedback to see how they're reacting to how you played.
And one of the best things I can say as a player in Windy City and also as a player in DC that we did pre-recorded partially. We pre-recorded.
We pre-recorded after the first 2 weeks.
After the first 2 weeks. Basically, I have found that it is nice to, as a player, to be able to watch the pre-recorded streams, not only with the viewers and be able to engage with the viewers. I like to be able to watch it because I will catch things I missed in the heat of the moment, in the heat of a scene that I didn't catch when I was playing the game.
And as a storyteller, I have the same problem. When I'm storytelling a game, I'm focused on the storyteller. So sometimes I'm not focusing on certain things characters are doing or certain things people are doing because I have to, they may be having a scene where they're role-playing amongst each other, and I've got to be prepping for whatever's coming, whatever scene's coming up next. I've got to be ready for that. So I'm doing that, and I don't get to give the full attention that would be, I wish I could give the players. I wish I could do both at once, but I can't. So I'm prepping for it. So when we watch it with the viewers, I'm getting to see these things. And the viewers sometimes pick up shit I miss and having them give that input. Maddox?
I once had someone explain that the difference between live streaming and then recording and putting it up live is the difference of building a table and duct taping a table. Not to say that the duct tape doesn't work, but it's a lot more panicked when you're, having to fix an issue on the fly versus if you have time and material to set it up correctly ahead of time.
That's absolutely true. That is absolutely true.
So the only difference is method.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so we basically touched on the Shanky topics. So now I'm going to go into some viewer questions because we've accumulated quite a few of those. So Rolling Cade, he is Gavin and plays Lamar Cade in Windy City After Dark, says, to all STs, do you find that you have a fleshed out idea for Chronicles when you start, or do you improvise everything from start to finish? Let's start, and I'm going to say not just STs, but basically GMs for any long-term campaigns.
This is not just all storytellers here from World of Darkness. I think we've term.
Let's start from Will.
I have to have a good foundation of what the story I need to tell is going to be. But I also know that I can't pour in all the cement until I sit down and talk to the players about what game we're going to be playing. Like, I can set up the blueprints and kind of measure out the house that I want to build, but until I talk to my players, I don't know how many floors the house is going to have or how many rooms or whatnot. So I do like to go in with a kind of fleshed out idea, at least what I would call like an elevator pitch, where you have like at least a page of information, and then kind of build on that as I extrapolate questions to the players, about their parents, about their life growing up, things like that, depending on the game.
Okay, Mickey?
Okay, so when I'm running a table game, I do outlines, like, Roman numeral 1, introduction, and then go through, and these are the beats I want to hit, and it allows my players to do whatever it is they're going to do, and so long as I hit those beats, then the story is still getting told and they're advancing along those lines. When with the Discord game I made, I made a sandbox for them to play in. And it was much more reactive. People would say, hey, this is something I want to do. Okay, let's do that. I think it just depends, because you can apply literally any method and be successful, so long as you do your due diligence. And that means figuring out what player expectations are, figuring out what your expectations are, consent, all that kind of good stuff. And then you can, whether it is a sandbox or more of a 5-act play sort of format, you can proceed and be successful.
Okay. Maddox.
I have found that I can improvise quite a lot and am usually comfortable in that. I had to build that talent. I went to many, many summer camps as a kid for improv acting and all that stuff, because it was something I wanted to be good at. But I also understand that I am a human with issues and problems and places where I'm weaker. And so I always say, plan for what you're not strong at. So if you cannot come up with a name to save your life, have a list of names. If describing the structure of something is difficult for you, write it out ahead of time. Yeah, this building seems about, 15 feet tall. There's like a broken lamp hanging over the door frame. Just, sorry, I'm pulling it out of my ass, which isn't at all writing it down. But, just focus where you feel you're weak, but also just know that because you've prepared for that stuff, you have all this stuff ahead of you that you didn't prepare, and you're not panicking because you already know what to do for stuff like that. So planning and improvisation is like, it's a it's a scale. You have to figure out where your balance is.
Okay, Ravinia.
For me, the way I've always done it is I have a concept. I figure out where I want the story to go. AKA, I have an end idea and I have a beginning idea. And then after I get my players and I find their backstories and all the juicy goodness there, and then I envelop that kind of stuff. I very much focus on, my players want to do A, B, C, or D. Okay, let's see if we can make that happen. Let's see if we can make this work and make this wonderful and beautiful and crazy and heart-wrenching and all that sort of stuff. But like Maddox, you plan for what you're not good at. I have a list of names sitting to the side or pinned to my GM screen whenever I'm running. I have traits, random traits that I'll just take my fingers and I will just wrap 3 fingers to them. And it's like, okay, this person's got allergies. They're not having a good day. And I kind of roll with that. So I've got Carl, the allergic to a tabaxi carpet seller that is trying to get on with his day kind of situations. And it's just wonderful. But yeah, I never fully plan out anything because you've got players. Players will break anything and everything.
No plan survives player contact.
Exactly. So you kind of have to roll with it and you just spin the plates up as you need them.
Not to mention players sometimes have to put in very minimal effort to destroy your plans, and that's the most annoying.
Yep.
It's like, I worked so hard on this, and you fuckers come through and
There
do
goes
that
3
crap.
pages of planning right there.
Yeah, I have
legit-
literally ripped pages out of the notebook in front of my players, crumpled it, and threw it away.
I've done that with NPC sheets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I just
I've
tear them
had-
in front of them and go, well, I guess I didn't need him after all.
Didn't need that one after all.
Yeah, the greatest. It's wonderful and it's terrible at the same time because I'll create an NPC and they'll have a backstory and a full on character sheet and yada yada yada, and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be the big bad for the next like 3 months. Going to be great.
2 sessions
And
are
then
dead.
no. I had one player who friggin' saw them and was just like, yeah, no, pop, just shot him in the face and killed him. I'm just like,
I know that feeling so much, Mickey. I had that happen with a sheriff in
Hey,
a
Shanky.
vampire game.
Ask
Delilah.
Delilah.
Yeah, Delilah.
I am good for that. I am fucking good for that. I will destroy his NPCs that he thinks are going to be this looming threat. I'm like, no. Screw that. Threat, gone. Okay, but I will say running my own games as far as planning versus improv, I have just thought of a term that really aptly describes how I go into running games as a relatively new storyteller. I like to have fluid structure. So I like to have a general idea of, because I run short form games. They're not long-term chronicles. They're not sandboxes, that kind of thing. They basically have to have plot points. They need to have certain points in plot that will lead you from the start to the conclusion of a game. And so I basically will have like for my Monster Hearts is a perfect example because I'm currently working on that one. During our 2 sessions of session 0, it was like a 0 and a 0.5. We worked collaboratively as a group, plotting out story hooks and an overarching plot for our game. And basically it will balance out to 3 sessions. Session is the introduction, and then the initiation of the culminating problem, and then the second session is about the planning and implementing the plan, and then third session is the resolution. And so I have those 3. I mean, it's literally like 3 lines. That's all I've written is what my plot is and for the game. And then I do have, and I plan, like Maddox said, I plan for things I'm weak in. I'm really good at coming up with names on the fly. Really good with that. I'm really good at describing things. If y'all have seen my Bluebeards, I'm really good at describing things. That's not a problem. I can give you all the details you want in the world. But but what bogs me down is knowing on the fly rule calls. So I will have references of rules handy. I use Roll20 to store character sheets and handouts and things like that to reference while I'm running games. And I will have those references blown up in my Roll20 so I can reference them as I need to while I'm running my games, because I'm not good at doing that on the fly. It's like, okay, because I want my players to have that flexibility to do whatever they want, really, within the limits of the game system. And so, I allow them to do that, but when they do it, I got to be able to on the fly know what the impact of that is going to be based on the rule system. So I have those references handy for me because I can't keep that in my mom brain. I have too much shit in my brain as it is. And Devin.
I'm probably going to echo a lot of what everyone else has said, because I am majority improv, but I do start with a concept, a setting, something, where we're going to start, what the end will be, or if not for a whole chronicle or campaign, then at least for like the first part. My D&D game, I knew where it was going to start. I knew what the ending was and that there was going to be a big conflict, and that everything else in there I even left parts of the world blank because I thought, well, the players are going to have something to say that I know are going to influence that. But for my vampire game that I ran, I knew basically what would be part one or book one, if you will. Like, that's what their main goal is. And then after that, it's up to them to come up with whatever they were going to do. So that's kind of how I do it, like bullet notes. Like if the character's got cool, juicy thing in their backstory, I'll be like, oh yes, making a note of that. Or if they say something and I'm like, you know what? My plan sucked. That's a much better plan. Let's do that. Like, here's something way more interesting. But the first time why I kind of do like pretty solidly improv for mostly anything and barely any planning is the first time I was a GM, I thought that you had to go in with all kinds of plans and that you had to have like everything written out and all of the notes and all of the everything like that. And I was super stoked to do it because I was like, yeah, this is going to be so much fun. And I went all out and like I had the setting and I had all of these NPCs and all this world building and all this plot stuff and this and that and the other thing. And the first session, after everyone had their characters created, within like the first hour, they had just basically thrown all that I had planned out the window. And I went, oh, well, I'm new. I did something wrong. So for the next session, did all of this planning based on the new information. Next session, same thing. Within the first 30 minutes, all of that was out the window. And I'm like, you know what? Next time, why even plan? Why plan? And so I went to the next session and I'm like, okay, guys, like this is where we left off. What's going on? And then it was a much better experience because I can pretty well pull things like really well. Sometimes names, it depends on the setting. Like names could be a little hard, but you have something on hand for that, like either a name generator or a list. It depends on what the game is, but I got a tip from another at the time in my first group that I DM'd, another storyteller or dungeon master, who said, well, sometimes for big conflicts, I just pre-roll and I just have a spreadsheet that has all of the rolls out. And I just like mark them off so that I'm not having to roll for 20 billion orcs or whatever it is that they were doing. And so sometimes I'll have that where I'm just like, okay, who cares about rolling? Like my NPCs, I tend to have a lot of NPCs since it's like heavy role play and my players want to adopt them. And so you end up with like half players, half NPCs. And it's like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense for them to sit the battle out, but I'm not going to roll for everybody. That's just way too much work for me. Like, let's just not.
Hey, Shanky, I want to adopt some NPCs.
Yeah, that works well. I'm going to start off my statement. I'm going to tell all the viewers out there, please don't do what I do. Please don't. If it works for you, you'll do it. Don't try to emulate it. As we found out with Wraith, I not only have issues prepping. When I try to prep for stuff, I can't do it. It causes problems. I should not prep. Because it adds to a workload that my brain doesn't process. So for Windy City, which is the vampire game that I'm still running, I went into Windy City. Here was my prep for Windy City. The coterie's been given a domain. You
And
weren't
thrown into a coterie.
Yeah, you're not even a coterie yet. You've now told you're a coterie. You've been given a domain. Have fun. Enjoy yourselves. That was what I went into Windy City doing. I run I'm not even going to say improv heavy. I run improv. Everything I do is improv. I will say, we talk about, there's a bit behind the scenes about, possible scenes coming up, but all of those are actually consequences for actions. None of it is me going, hey, what about, this storyline? No. After the first couple episodes, everything I do is improv the consequences for the actions the players have taken. I turn them loose in the sandbox that is Chicago, and I let them run. And I don't have to do prep. I don't advise it. You've got to be very quick on your feet. And not only that, it's more than just the improv. You've got to be able to improv and be quick on your 3 feet in a way that the story still makes structural sense, and sense in a timeline way and a character motivation way. And I'll be frank, I don't know how I do it. It's instinctual for me because of the way my brain is wired, that I can lay threads and I'm not quite sure why I put it in there as a consequence, but then later on it makes perfect sense. I was prepping for something that I didn't even realize I was prepping for at the time. In terms of story, I was laying a future storyline that I didn't even realize I was doing, because
I called him on that.
Yeah,
I called him on that. I'm like, you totally set this up and you didn't realize it.
And that's the way I do it. Is all of mine is 100% improv. You can't say I prepped for Chicago when I just read the book and moved all the characters in.
The amount of prep you did really was it was all the back end shit with making sure that all the stuff was uploaded into Fantasy Grounds and stuff like that. But as far as plot lines and stuff, no, you don't craft plot lines for us to follow. You allow us to sit in a sandbox, build our castles, destroy them with our actions and consequences, then rebuild them because consequences lead to further action.
Right. And even Wraith, though, the prep I did for Wraith going into season 1 was they're going to be on a train, they die. Thomas is the one who did it. And they're going to eventually figure that out. That was the prep. I knew about the building that they were going to use as their initial haunt, because that was actually an antique store that Berlin and I used to go to all the time. Nice old guy ran it. And that was the prep for it. But even that, when the game like Wraith, I spent a lot more time prepping, because the complexity of Wraith made it very difficult to improv so many Wraiths with a shadow that has its own dark passions. And I found I couldn't do it. I can't do well with those. Even the infamous Paranoia one shot, I went to it going, okay, the group is going to go kill Santa Claus. That was my prep. That was it. They're going to go kill Santa Claus. And I gave them some R&D objects, and I gave them some of this, and they ran amok, and everything else was my ability to improv. So I don't advise people do it. But if you're one of the few that can improv to that level, you'll know it already, and you'll do it. It's that simple.
Okay, so next question is from Astral Aberration, one of our mods here, and he also plays as a guest player in Windy City After Dark, and he has played in Big Motherfucking Crab Truckers as well on our stream. The game that shall not be discussed.
Still need to watch it.
All right. He asks, what was your most thrilling or exciting moment as a storyteller or game master, and how did you help bring it about through the story? Let's start with Shanky on that and then work our way from top to bottom.
Damn. See, I have so many because I'm as the storyteller. My wife hates me when I do this to her. When the Shanky twist hits her in a way she didn't expect. And I, instead of getting, because Lynn's the type that likes to think of what scene she's got coming and she plans out what she thinks she'll do. And then I hit her with the Shanky twist that, because you don't always know everything's going to happen. And it gets the raw emotional pull out of her. When I hit Devin.
Because I hit panic, because I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do.
That was an example of, in Wraith, that the example was when she had to kill Palmer in Wraith. That was a big one. For Devin, when I did things to her like, oh, you go to see Ben, and Ben's like, you weren't here. Devin didn't expect that. that was just raw, pure. She was role playing at that point off of her instinct of her character. And what I got out of her was, I mean, she's always amazing. But it was fucking amazing to watch that, how that played out, that whole episode. The season finale of Wraith was good. That was crazy. Little things like that. I mean, it's hard as the storyteller for me to nail it down to one. The season finale for season 2 of Windy City. There was a general plan going into it because I talked with the players. It's the season finale. What do you see for your season finale? Because as Relinda's pointed out, it's not my story. It's the player's story. I'm there to make actions have consequences and to throw a shanky twist in. So I went to each, talk to each of the players. What do you see for the season finale? And that's how the season finale came about. And there were still shanky twists thrown in there. Again, apparently I like to do mean things to Devin because she didn't know that Sun was going to try to put the whammy on her. Verlin knew how to deal with Tyrus. There's no twist I could put on Tyrus, though I did go throw a twist that Dred showed some interest. That was a good one.
That was a fucking twist. That came out of fucking nowhere.
But yeah, that's it for me. It's hard for me to nail one because I've been blessed with some amazing casts on these shows that I've done, and to where they make the work for the pulling out these amazing scenes easy for me because the cast do it. They're that good.
And really what Bill does is it's not that he necessarily does anything plotting to make it happen. He just basically is instinctual and does something, what he calls his shanky twist, that it just dawns on him to pull his stunts.
That's my improv.
And he improvs it and sees how we react. And that brings out that type of excitement.
Yeah, that Ben scene I mentioned about Eleanor, about going and him saying he didn't remember. I came with that when she showed up and asked him about it. And I was like, he didn't see her. And it turned into a whole thing. Mm-hmm. I do that a lot.
So Devin, what was a highlight for you?
Oh gosh. Well, if you hadn't asked me, I would have had like probably 20. But as soon as the question is asked, it's like,
At your home games, what has been a really exciting character thing done that you were like, wow?
Well, usually where it's really wow and exciting is when they can outthink me, which is not me saying like, I'm so clever at planning, because sometimes I'm really not. But sometimes where it's like, it seems like the players are going in one direction and they're going to do this, and then they do or say something. For example, sending a text to an NPC saying, we have a situation, you're going to need to come help us. And then that NPC at the very end of this conversation they're having in this tense situation that could have been solved without violence, ends up with that NPC showing up and doing exactly what they were asked to do, which was basically punch right through the person who looked like they were the problem.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool, because it was like, oh, thank you for setting this up for me, but I didn't realize this was going to happen. But here we are. This is great. The first game I ever ran, I had given, it was a little homebrewed spell that I gave them because they helped basically a demigod. The party had helped this god and said, oh, well, if you need me, you can call on me. And here it is. And it was a really OP spell. They never used it until they had to fight a whole army of undead things. And then at the very end, they were almost all dead. And they said, we need to use this spell. And it was a really cool moment where they summoned in, all of this. But there's really great moments like that. Also, when the characters interact and have a really great moment in RP where it's like, ooh, character development or something, where I don't even have to be involved in that. I can just sit back here. In my D&D game, they ended up going to the land of the dead, not on purpose, but they went there and there was some really great character interactions and character development that came out of that, which was awesome.
I get that watching Eleanor and Jackie.
So for me, I have two, but from both of my Bluebeard's Brides game that I've run. In the first one, there was a situation that I had basically set up, and because when you're setting up a Bluebeard's Bride game, the prep for it is basically you already know the story because it's generally following the story of the folktale. But basically, what you're doing is you're picking rooms for your players to explore. So I picked rooms based on their consent forms to ensure that none of the rooms violated their consent, because it does. Caveat: I tend to run games that deals with very hard topics. Bluebeard's Bride is one that just deals with a lot of feminine societal issues that are problems, and it basically explores those in a horror setting. So the first one, the scene was where they went into the cellar and they found the wooden dildo in the wine cask. And that the reactions of my players as I was describing what they felt and experienced from this exposure to this object that was obviously haunted, basically their reactions across the whole table, and even the viewer reactions when I went back to watch the on demand of it, I was like, holy hell, that was exciting, because everybody was like on the edge of their fucking seat. But yeah, so that was really, and all I did for leading up to that was just basically I picked that room because it was one that fit within their consents, and they chose to investigate that object. And when they chose to investigate it, I was like, okay, here's your consequence for your action. The second one was in the second stream of Bluebeards that I did, where over the course of the game, the players had made certain decisions and certain actions that led to the Animus character breaking, basically shattering, which is kind of like in Call of Cthulhu when you go insane. That's what it is in Bluebeard's Bride. You basically, or in Monster Hearts when you become your darkest self, that's what it is in Bluebeard's Bride. So, and that player legit dialed that shit up to fucking 11 and just ran with it. And I just sat back and loved it. It was amazing to see that player just go full on dark as the righteousness aspect of the bride. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it wasn't even, all I did to lead up to that was just give consequences for actions. And I found that leads to some amazing, exciting situations in game that players do.
Where to start? It's so hard to pick just one amazing moment. It's one
you
of my
gotta say peeing on the gas station wall.
that was way
that was
too good.
Plague Winds.
Yes,
Who was playing Garrett, the werewolf, who just decided to mark the gas station wall as his turf.
Wall. It was perfect.
I thought it would be him going, I'm in love, as he watched Relin's character dart past him in the middle of combat.
There was so much going on in the werewolf game. So many moments. It's hard to pick one at all. But yeah, the peeing on the gas station wall. Garrett's stank, because that's what it is.
That led to some great role play from others. That was like everybody reacted to it.
And that's the thing, is I'm just looking, and it's the greatest moment as a GM, seeing the characters interact and you're not having to do anything, and you're just you can milk this for a little bit, you know, and just enjoy it as a viewer. I really like it when my players get especially creative. There was a point in time where I had a escape scene, and castle's coming down, you know, the classic, we defeated the big bad, and the big bad's power was all throughout the foundation of the building, and now it's collapsing kind of thing. And I don't know why it happened this way, but the wizard just turns to the halfling, grabs them, and throws them out the window.
I mean,
and everybody's like, what are you doing?
Who hasn't wanted to yeet a halfling, out a window? I mean, I know
that's like punting dwarves. I mean, come on, we all want to do it.
But, it ended up, he had a scroll of mass featherfall that he had gotten from like the beginning of the game. Like he spent all of his coin on one of their paydays at one point on this thing. And finally, this is where he uses it, because he's basically just, the wizard is trying to throw everyone out the window and shouting like, trust me, this,
my
it was
first
the
rule is
biggest
anytime
trust
someone says the words
exercise.
trust me, you don't.
That's what I was thinking the entire time. They're not gonna. And then yeah, he cast Featherfall, the biggest trust exercise I've ever seen in a D&D game.
I mean, I say trust me all the time to the Windy City players, and not once have they come back with anything other than uh-oh.
He's totally sus.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's just that creativity. I like seeing it, and I like being the instigator
Mhm.
of things like that.
And Maddox?
I was dreading this moment because one thing that I was hoping to have to omit, but you guys are forcing me into the limelight on this. None of my campaigns last long enough for there to be any real payoff.
Oh,
That's the one thing with friend schedules, and I said before, like
yeah.
they fall apart, but I don't lose the group, and so I just have to think up a new story, new world, new rules, etc.
Mhm.
I'll tell you something, Maddox. Don't feel bad about admitting that, because prior to DC by Night was my first actual chronicle I ever ran, because everything before that, though it may be set in the same city, 5 or 6 sessions, and then I'd lose players. And we'd have different, because I was playing in the Army. New players come in, new players leave. We didn't have a chronicle. DC by Night was my very first actual long-running chronicle. So admit that all you want. That makes Wraith my second and Windy City the third ever. And I've been playing since 81.
Yeah. All right. Glad to know it's a common problem, at least. But the closest I've ever gotten was a player. She was new to D&D, but she wrote out her bard's backstory and gift wrapped me a villain.
Nice.
It was impressive. She had a whole backstory of why he hated her and why she hated him. I'm like, all right, cool. And all she had to do was name him Lord Jackass, because her bard wanted to write a song about a lord and call him Lord Jackass. And so she wrote out the whole song. It was wild. And then as I started thinking about this villain, like, all right, she gave me an NPC. Let's start making this dude here. And I realized that he could have his fingers in every single backstory pie that my players presented me. And so I managed to tie that one villain into 5 different backstories in some way, because my players all chose to be like disgraced nobility at some point in their life. So that makes things easy. And just the amount of vitriol and hatred I developed in my players for this guy was so much fun to do, because it's very difficult, shocker, to get someone to be hateable. And so the fact that I accomplished that to the point where, like, even if the campaign hadn't fallen apart, they still would have talked about him as if he were worse than Satan incarnate.
I don't want to throw on that one, because I've found in Windy City it's very easy to get my players to hate the people who live in Windy City for some reason, because there's a number of my NPCs now that the players of Windy City really just fucking hate. That's on me, I guess.
It's totally your fault. Okay, Mickey?
Yeah, to caveat off what Maddox said, which was, and several of the other ones, getting a consistent game group is like catching a unicorn. It's rare and wonderful when it happens. So the Bali had come to the city, okay? And one of the powers of the Bali is that they're able to in WAD 20 was they're able to use a power to figure out what your weakness is. So how did I translate that into V5? They learn what your convictions are, because, like it or not, those are your greatest weaknesses. The things you hold most dear. And so I created a scenario which would cause one of my players to fall victim to one of their convictions. It didn't mechanically do anything against them, but it was something that shook this player to their core. She tried to help those in need. Okay. So you're going to run up on this guy who's, drinking out of a brown paper bag on an abandoned street, not an abandoned street, but on an empty street in downtown KC, and he's contemplating ending it because he had lost a bunch of money and his wife was leaving him and taking the kid and everything like that, and his life was falling apart. And over the course of the next probably hour and a half, she managed to talk him down. And then as he's crossing the street with a new lease on life and hope in his heart and yada, 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 bam! And she was just shocked. Talk about a shanky twist, right?
Gotta love those.
The real messed up part was from behind her, she hears, "Well, ain't that just a motherfucker?" And it's this guy's ghost.
I love throwing ghosts in the games. I'm not gonna lie.
She was, and the player is Coyote Lewis, who you will see here in Monster Hearts soon. There's for that stuck with her, and she was able to take that. Not only did she role play it beautifully, but she used that scene to inform her character and going forward, because it's our experiences that inform who we are. And when you're able to apply that to a character, as opposed to just having them be like, well, I'm a barbarian, or I'm a wizard, or I'm a Brujah, or I'm a Tremere. If you utilize your character's experiences to inform who they are, not just the mechanical stuff around it, that's when because one of the things I like to do is I like to set up a state of the world, and especially in like a sandbox type game, is I'll set up a state of the world. This is what's happening right now, and you can either choose to interact with it or you can go do your own thing. But that world is going to keep on spinning. And so when in that instance, that gave her the impetus to just because who know, especially for newer players, who the hell knows what the Bali are? And a lot of V5 players are new to VTM and the World of Darkness at large, so they don't know who the Bali are. Well, she knows now, and it gave her and she was able to convince the other players to really have a hate on for the Bali and to really go after them. And so that was a wonderful little tidbit. In other games, so what's one of the ways you reduce moisture buildup in Antiquity is you would have hay lying around, because hay would absorb the moisture and it would keep things from growing out of, and then you just sweep out the hay and yada yada yada. That's great, right? Well, the problem is when the players barricade the doors to the barracks and then light the barracks on fire, thereby removing the primary threat to their machinations in that town, and they're basically then able to go about their business largely unimpeded. That was fantastic. And going back to what Devin had said is, there's at any given table there's 4 to 6 players at a table on average. That's 6 brains, each with unique experiences, educations, trainings, et cetera, going against your one brain with its one perspective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. yeah, you're not the smartest person at the table by virtue of just sheer brain power being applied to a situation. So, I don't try to outthink them. I try to present them with a world state and have them react to that world state. And then, in my long running Star Wars game, it was how they reacted to the death of the mentor, because man, I spent a long time building him up, and then when I killed him, they were inconsolable for about the next 3 or 4 weeks. It was
the George R.R. Martin method. Got it.
Build an SPC your players love and then kill them.
I may or may not be guilty of that.
It's the Obi-Wan. It's not even George R.R. Martin. It's Obi-Wan.
It's Obi-Wan.
It's like I said, it was the mentor character. And what happened in the very first Star Wars movie? Obi-Wan fucking dies. What does that do how does that inform the rest of the characters going forward? Profoundly. And it did, and it was wonderful, and it continued to inform their characters going forward. So yeah.
Cool. Now, Will?
I've done dickish things because my players are dumb, and they will spend an entire half hour of game time just standing over a shield that they found that wasn't even used by an NPC. They were just why would they have it on their backs? And so when people do that, I tend to take advantage of that situation. So when I saw that they were spending a lot of time on this stupid shield, I was like, well, now it's cursed. Now it's cursed. Now you got to deal with it. Suck on that. But I'll also be, to pull off of Mickey's point, when in my Star Wars game, there was a moment where we were running to the end of our first season finale, and one of the characters wanted to talk to a Mon Cal Jedi that I had brought in, and I wasn't in the mood to act as that NPC, so I had them find that he had been murdered. So there's moments where I'm just look, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. But I think my favorite moment has been in one of the podcasts that I was doing. 3 of the 5 players over the course of the game had sold themselves over to Tiamat, and at one point their cleric makes a deal with one of the elder gods who is a shamanistic, it was the old man crow is what I called him. And the crow had given him 3 of his feathers as kind of favors that he could call in. And there was a discussion where he finally figured out in character that 3 of the players had sold themselves to Tiamat to try to save the first one that sold himself to Tiamat. And without missing a beat, the dwarf player just holds out the 3 feathers and gives one to each of them. And everybody at the table was almost incensed with how he could just use the favors that he had earned to just free them from the mistakes that they had made. And he was just, I remember this, he said, we either sink as a group or we succeed as a group. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. And then he kind of, as they were starting to cry, he was like, and stop fucking keeping secrets. Secrets will be the death of us. And so that's been the motto of the group ever since.
You made me, I just now remembered. There's only been once that I can remember where I was completely caught flat-footed, flabbergasted. I didn't even have a fucking response to something a player did. And this was back in the Army. Playing Vampire, they were going up against an Elder Nosferatu, and he was manhandling the shit out of him because, potence and everything else. And he had one of the players picked up by the front of his shirt, and he's holding him up, and he's just holding him in the air, and he's just berating him. And he finally gets to the point, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do to me. And the player looks right at me and goes, and now I'm going to poke him in his eyes. And I was like, wait, what?
You fell into the trap of monologuing.
Yeah, you're being held by your throat by this Nosferatu who's right by your face, ready to rip your head off. And your response is, yeah, he goes, yeah, my response is, gack. I was like, okay, shit. Yeah, I had to say, he drops you because you surprised me that much that what can you respond to it? He dodges his head. No, fuck, who would have? Jesus Christ, this is what, Three Stooges all of a sudden? poked him right in the eyes. The Nosferatu dropped him, and they all just scattered, gone. And I was like, "You win, man. You got me on this one." The one time I had a player do that I had no response.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick 10-minute bio break. And then we are going to continue with viewer questions. While we are on break, if you have questions that you would like for us to answer. Now, I do have some. I have chat paused at the next question, which is actually from Timber Brad. We will resume there and continue through the chat. And if you have questions, use your boons or your chat points down at the bottom of the chat window and highlight your message so that I can see it nice and easily as I'm scrolling through chat. All right.
And we'll go to a 10-minute break. And right now I just have a slide, but it may suddenly change and I may sneak the Windy City After Dark break in there just because, I like doing it because it's got good music in it.
Yeah, it does.
So we'll be back in 10 minutes. We just need to give people a chance to stretch
get up
some
and
legs.
move around. We've been sitting here for 2 hours. So,
Yep. So we'll be right back, everybody. Just stand by.
Stand by.
Splinters of my soul cut through your skin and burrow within, and burrow within. Splinters of my soul cut through your skin and burrow within, and burrow within. Splinters of my soul cut through your skin and burrow within, and burrow within. I've always been the hunter, nothing on my tail. But there was something in you I knew could make that change. To capture a predator, you can't remain a prey. You have to become an equal in every way. So look in the mirror and tell me, who do you see? Is it still you? Or is it me? Become the beast. We don't have to hide. Do I terrify you? Or do you feel alive? Do you feel the hunger? Does it howl inside? Does it terrify you? Or do you feel alive? Splinters of my soul cut through your skin and burrow within, and burrow within. Splinters of my soul cut through your skin and burrow within, and burrow within. So embrace the darkness, and I will help you see that you can be limitless and fearless if you follow me. We are the lions in a world of lies. We are the predators, the Does it terrify you? Or do you feel alive? Splinters of my soul cut through your skin and burrow within, and burrow within. Splinters of my soul cut through your skin and burrow within, and burrow within. Splinters of my soul cut through your skin and burrow within, and burrow within. Splinters of my soul cut through your skin to burrow within, to burrow within. Do you feel the hunger? Does it howl inside? Does it terrify you? Or do you feel alive? Allow me to introduce myself, though I fear you've heard my name, and that you've heard the story of Countess Bathory. History is told by the victors, heroic warriors, and mad kings. Will you hear my story from the lips of Bathory? They call me blood-sucking demon, queen of hell, sadistic killer, a monster tale, bathing in the blood of virgins, beautiful, drinking the blood of virgins, the blood countess. Who is she really? Who is she really? Blood countess. Who is she really? Arjabla Bathory. I was very wealthy and powerful, a widow with political rivals keen to destroy me and take my property. My plea was never offered, all my confessors were all tortured, or how they destroyed me for my property. They put me up, shut me up, shut me up, put me up, put me up, shut me up, and told a story a bitch called Valkyrie. Blood sucking demon, queen of hell, sadistic killer, a monster tale, bathing in the blood of virgins.
And we're back. If you want to hear the end of the song, you'll have to watch Windy City After Dark on when we return on, I believe it's June 6th is when our vampire stream returns.
Yep.
Double check the date. Yep, June 6th is when we return for season 3.
Mhm.
Then you'll get to hear it or
Or-
watch our back episodes. You could do that too.
I would
Or
also
go to
say,
the-
yeah,
Or go
Carlene's
to
YouTube.
Carlene's YouTube.
Go to www.carlene.com.
Yeah, you can listen to her stuff right on her site.
Yep, 'cause she's amazing and she lets
You
us
can also
use her.
find her on Spotify.
She lets us use her music. We've, as everything with this channel, we don't use stuff we're not licensed to use or don't have permission to use, and she lets us use all of her stuff. So she's pretty fucking amazing, actually.
Okay, so resuming questions, we are going to actually combine Timber Brad's question that he had in the beginning of the chat with Astral's next question. So Timber Brad asked, for everyone, have you found any game systems that work better for you in certain formats? And Astral wanted to know, let me scroll through and find it. What's the system you haven't tried you most look forward to running? So have you found one that works better in the format that you prefer to run games? And what is a system that you want to run?
Who wants to go first?
Let's
I'll
start with,
start.
okay, Mickey.
And having played first edition, WAD 20 and V5. V5 is the best of them, in my opinion, caveat, for telling a narrative-driven chronicle. The focus is on cinematic style storytelling, which means, you're going to have your action scenes are going to be big, bombastic, and brief. And it allows for, Devin and Jackie Eleanor and Jackie to have those really meaningful conversations. Because ultimately that's what it's about. As far as a system I'd like to run, oh boy, there was a Mass Effect system based on D20 that I saw come out a while back. Glancing at it, I think they tried to go too overcomplicated with it, because any D20 system is just rife for overcomplication. But if I can parse it down to its bones and build something from there, I'll do that. But yeah, I'd love to run a Mass Effect game because I just love that meta.
And I'm going to point out, when you say you'd love to run it, for those that don't know, everyone you see here now, either they've already been given permission to stream, or we've pretty much decided is allowed to stream a game on our channel if they ever decide to stream one as running it, because Ravnos Archon is going to stream his first game with our studio. He's got his own channel, which at the end of it, we'll let him plug his channel because we love sharing the love anyway. But Ravinia's run one before. Mickey, we've already told he can run one if he wants. Maddox has talked about maybe running one, and Relyn and I are behind that. Devin knows she's got carte blanche to run some shit. That's just,
If she ever chooses to.
if she chooses to. That's so yeah. Mickey has the option at some point to stream with us.
All right,
for
so
sure.
who would like to go next on that two-part question? And if you agree that V5 is one of the better systems for just about any format because it leads to high narrative games, then that's fine.
I'll go on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's no secret. I love to run Vampire. I run my best Vampire games. I liked Wraith, but the 20th anniversary edition of World of Darkness products was excessively crunchy at times, and Wraith was needlessly complicated at other times and vaguely not complicated enough in places it should have been. But Vampire was my first taste at high role play at serious role playing in a game that wasn't a lot more of a little role play with a lot of combat. And it's got a special place in its heart, and I love seeing it in a streamed format. The games I'd like to play, I can't wait to bring Zas Urkala to a stream because it's based off of Urkala is the Sumerian word for the underworld, for the netherworld, and that's a subject that's kind of near and dear to me. So running a Zas Urkala game is going to be interesting. It's Cthulhu brought up to 11 in some ways, but it's really dark. I'm looking forward to a Demon the Fallen game, even though it's going to be crunchy and complicated. I haven't seen enough of them, so we're going to do one. And then I'm still eyeballing at some point a Knights Black Agent game because the concept of a bunch of players being like Jason Bourne or James Bond level of secret agent and being found out there's vampires and having to try to find and deal with that. It sounds interesting to me. It's a little bit of supernatural mixed with Jason Bourne and James Bond with some Cthulhu thrown in or some, vampire thrown in. So yeah.
I guess I'll go. Don't everyone speak up at once. I agree with what's said about V5. I think it's really great for narrative. And since my style tends to be more RP heavy, it's just a system that gives more room for that. D&D, my D&D game is very RP heavy, but you basically have to throw most of the mechanics out the window in order to make that work. Like you have your insight rolls and your perception rolls and stuff, but otherwise it's like, well, most of these mechanics are really for combat and we're not doing much of that. So there's that. But I like them both. I think D&D 5th edition is pretty adaptable if you're adventurous and you have adventurous players that are okay with adapting those things. For games that I'd like to run, I'd like to give Call of Cthulhu a shot. I've never done that. See how that's done. And then also The Expanse has a tabletop game that I have been wanting to run for a while, but just have never gotten around to doing it. Okay.
Mickey's like, I
All
want
right.
in.
I got you. Okay.
McStabber Studios could use some sci-fi.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll make a note. And I don't remember what system that is. But it's nothing that I've done before. So those are the two big ones. Then of course I do a lot of homebrew. I just take a system and then go, okay, this is what we're doing. So there's like a bunch of ideas in my head that will probably live there forever.
You mean the Curse of the Storyteller? Got it.
The Curse of the Storyteller.
The
Yeah.
Game Master or Dungeon Master, pick one.
Yep. Exactly.
I have some very limited experience, of course, having only actually run 2 games so far and getting ready to run my 3rd game. Both games that I've played were in one system. It's based on the Powered by the Apocalypse system, which is a 2d6 system where, for actions that require rolls, which are actually fairly few and far between, you roll your 2d6, add up the total of the 2 dice, and then add your stat to it to get your total. And then on it, like a 10 plus, it's a stellar success, and mid-range, you get consequences with your success, and then a failure is like a 6 or less. So a very simplistic system. I love them. I think that they are actually, the Powered by the Apocalypse system is designed for cinematic storytelling, high narrative, short, brief combats, if they even happen at all. It's very impactful. Basically, everything is kind of melodramatic, kind of larger than life, and very dramatic and narrative heavy. So I love playing those for short run and one shot style games, because you're going to get fantastic high impact story very easily with that system. So that I love it. I would love to explore other systems that are similar in structure, that focus on more cinematic storytelling and less crunchy combat mechanics, because I just love the crazy impactful stories that you get out of those. But one of the games that what was the one I told you to back for me, Bill?
Shit. Let me pull it up because my brain is pretty
There's one I
toasty.
actually backed on Kickstarter, and it looks freaking fascinating. And
Court
I'm
of
like,
Blades.
Court of Blades. I want to run that game. So it's coming out next year. The Kickstarter just ended on it. I made sure Bill backed it for me because he's the one with the Kickstarter account. And so
The Addiction. Got it.
yeah, the Addiction. And I'm like, that's fine. You it can come to you, but it's mine. But basically, I like dealing with either modern or period settings that are true to life settings, but twisted in a way that you can tell some really engaging, darker, kind of twisty stories with dealing with tough topics. And so that, basically games built like that are ones that I want to run. So I have like a little laundry list.
I will follow Relin on that, simply to also advocate for crunch to a certain degree, only because I started my D&D adventures with 3.5. So,
Lots of crunch.
I'm no stranger to crunch. I've never been good at it, but I understand that there is some fun to be had in a crunchy system.
Wait a minute. You can do crunch without munchkining. If you munchkin the crunch, that's where you're talking about whether you're good at it or not. You can do crunch without munchkining.
Fair point. I can accept that. But I found that games that are either very easy to pick up or I've drooled over several one-page RPGs that are just like, it's a very commonly known one now, but Honey Heist, you have 2 stats. And that's all you need, because the stats fall into one category or the other. But like, I find that I'm solid enough with 5th edition D&D that I could run that game in my sleep by this point. It's really easy for me because I know enough of the rules where when I don't know a rule, one of my players does. So I can mitigate the crunch by not having to be an all-knowing god. And then a game I want to run is City of Mist, because I have always been drawn to the modern fantasy, like powers in the everyday world sort of vibe. And that game literally is that, because it's all just about how you have a story awaken inside you. And it can be anything from, you could be the mythos of Zeus. You could have like, Odin fight fucking elder god at a pancake house. Like, there's so much variety you can get just from asking a simple question of what defines something as a story. And like, comic books, movies, music even, I think could be given arguments for that. And that's so fascinating to see what sort of character ideas and concepts people would gravitate to in something with that much open possibility to it. So that's definitely a game I would love to run, and would be the game I would run for the McStabbers if/when I probably end up doing it.
I've seen a number of people that streamed the City of Mist, but I've never actually managed to catch any of them. So it'd be interesting to see a game I haven't seen before. I love seeing new things. So
I love running Legend of the Five Rings. I think AEG really hit its stride with the roll and keep system that it came out with, and the 4th edition has been probably the best edition of the game. So I will always, if somebody says, hey, let's be samurai, I will be like, yes, please. A game that I want to run that I haven't run is probably Titan's Grave, because I saw Will Wheaton do it for a little bit, and it has a system that I kind of read a little bit about, because it only has like 3 classes, but depending on how you build your classes, it kind of like evolves from there, and it's kind of really, really interesting. A game that I want to run, though, that I haven't gotten a chance to run is probably a Scion 1st edition. I think it is overlooked, and it does kind of fall into the Munchkin trope very heavily if you go into it with that mindset. And it's just like there's so much more there, honestly, than just like running in, beating up a bunch of ninjas, and kind of like beating an ogre in the middle of the street, and then just kind of running out and getting your glory for it. It's just like there's so much more to that. But that's a hill I'll always die on, is that there's always more to action games than just the action.
That's why I didn't bring up Shadowrun as much as I used to love playing Shadowrun. It's got a reputation as a min-maxer's game, and there's so much more to Shadowrun that can be done with it without the min-maxing. It is very crunchy, but without min-maxing, you can tell some pretty amazing stories. It's when it gets to min-maxing that people are throwing 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 dice that it takes a different, a whole different level.
Gosh, I'm last, aren't I?
Yes, you are. Or did Mickey do his? Yeah, he did his.
Yeah,
Yep.
he did his.
For me, World of Darkness is always going to be the place I go to for the big story driven games. Now, I'm a role play heavy DM, so I can take any system crunchy as fuck and make it role play and cinematic. Like a personal favorite is I love 3.5 D&D. So it can be crunchy as all hell, but you can mitigate that in certain ways, and there's lots of tweaks to rules that you can change on the fly. That's also why I like Pathfinder so much, aka 3.75 is what we nickname it. Because it took those ideas that DMs were already doing at the time and just kind of put it in there, and they added some flair and things like that. I've wanted for game systems, I've always wanted to try Fate. I'm right there with Will on wanting to do Titan's Grave, Ashes of Valkana. I'm down for that. I'm willing to full scale take a look at the Dragon Age system and see what I can do with it.
I want to play that.
But Astro has already put it, just was talking about Dragon Age. It says it's just crunchy as shit.
I'm pretty sure there are ways to change that.
I'm sure
but
that can be
it's-
homebrewed.
That's kind of the thing, is that I'm like, I want to look at what they've got there, and then I'll take it apart and Frankenstein myself up something. Personal favorite, personal games I've always wanted to play in Demon the Fallen. I've never played Legend of the Five Rings. That always sounds interesting. I'm trying to think.
Didn't you say you wanted to try a Shadowrun at one point?
Yes, I do. Even though it's crunchy as all heck, and there's like one edition that we don't talk about. I think there's an edition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another
The
thing
new one's dog shit.
Yeah. Another thing that I'd like to do is I could do a Cyberpunk Red game. I have to admit the rules aren't as crunchy as people think. It's
that would
getting
be
the
fun.
characters set up. That part's the complicated part. And then you get into the game and you just roll a couple of dice here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read the rules for Cyberpunk Red, and it didn't really grab me, because I'd originally, when Cyberpunk came out as a video game, I'd planned to run a mini-series to coincide with it, because I love doing
With the
that
edition
kind of stuff,
we got the free Cyberpunk
Yeah.
Red. So
yeah, and I read the rules, and I was like, it's not really my thing. If I'm going to do something like that, I'll go back to Shadowrun.
Yeah.
I
And
would
that's how a lot of
play
people
that as
compare.
well. I'm just saying.
I always wanted to play the little. I like that cyberpunk idea. I love that idea. Another one that sounds really good for me to play and run is the Dune game. I like Dune. I'm a big fan of that.
So what you're hearing from Ravinia is she's got a whole lot of games she wants to run or
Yeah.
play, and she's down.
She's got her laundry list too.
I've got a huge laundry list. It's as big as my well, it's not that big. It's long, but
She's down for some TTRPG. That's what she's saying.
yeah. And I mean, I got Werewolf coming too. I've already got like the basic structure done.
Ooh. Yay, exciting, exciting. Yes, that's going to be coming to McStabber Studios. Woo! All right. So I'm Gray asked, how would you manage the fact that a year has to be played in 10 episodes? Is focusing on certain periods enough? Could the evolution of the players be corrupted by this type of playing?
Okay, I'm going to go right off on that. In Chicago, 10 episodes isn't a year for us. 10 episodes is however many however much time passes. We deliberately keep all time references vague because I don't want to. I made a mistake in DC of we track time to the day. And a lot of episodes were one day to the next, hardly any time skips.
It gets bogged down
And it
real
bogged down with the
fast.
timeline. And the progression of a character that you're playing like that doesn't match the power curve of how long a vampire would live. You would be maxed out in everything before even a decade was over. You'd fucking have everything at that rate. So we keep all time vague. It's however much time it takes. I think season 2, if you look at it, maybe it's a month, couple months.
Couple months, maybe.
It's
Less
so
than
vague.
3, certainly.
Yeah, it's so
and
vague.
It's 10
It's
episodes.
just however many it is. And I keep
But
it that way.
On average, we go about a week between our episodes, but that's give or take because sometimes we pick up the next episode just a few nights later because there's hot things that we need to address quickly.
And sometimes we pick up the same night.
Sometimes we pick up the same night, so it doesn't always flow like, a consistent timing. So we keep it very fluid in our games for that reason, so that the progression of characters is in pace with the progression of the game.
Yeah, because I guess that's a question for everybody here. Do you like counting strict time in games? Is that, an exact timeline? Is that important in your games, the type of games you run? Because for me, I find that very few games does it add anything.
I will say for mine with Bluebeards, that all happens in one day. But with Monster Hearts, there will be a progression of time because we are telling more than a one shot. We are doing a mini series. So there will be some time progressed. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to flow yet, but we will see as we play.
Time is wibbly wobbly.
Yeah, I will caveat on that and say that time, much like gender, can be fluid. So,
Yes.
so to say that I would always keep track of like down to the second sort of like calendar in my brain, no, that's virtually and physically impossible for me. I keep time poorly in the real world, so I can't be expected to do it any better in a fictional one. But having general ideas, like if my players say, how long has it been since we last did that thing? I can remember the thing, because that's where my brain recalls it, and go, okay, that seems roughly around like a month worth of effort from that point to where you are now. And I just go off of estimation is the godsend of all people who run games. Estimation every single time.
Which is
It
funny because
depends.
the old editions of D&D literally was having you track, okay, your recovery was X amount of days. And I mean, it tracked to the day everything going on in the old editions of D&D, and it was crazy.
Yeah, that just proves that realism isn't always fun.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the system and the group of players. Because I have one group of D&D players that want to know exactly what day it is every time that they're doing something. So that puts more effort on me to kind of create a calendar. But unless you're running something where there's a deadline for something, like if in my Alpha War game there's a wedding that's coming up, then I'll track time. But otherwise, no, it's more work.
Oh, that makes sense though, because one of the storylines in DC, we had to count some time, which was the upcoming Thin Bloods coming, or the addicts addicted to Thin Blood alchemy. There was a drug that was made.
It was a 30-day countdown.
A 30-day countdown before the withdrawals hit them. And we had to track time for that one because you got a 30-day countdown.
Mm-hmm.
We got to know where they are on the countdown at any time.
I will say generally I'm sorry to interrupt, but I will say generally as a player in a Shanky game where it's a longer running chronicle, I will occasionally as a player ask, what is it, a weekend day? Is it a weekday? What so that way I know what my character's doing depending on what stage of the week we're in.
And my response is usually, is it?
Yeah.
Is it a weekend? I don't know. Is it?
Sure.
Then it is.
The best bit of advice I can give to that question is tracking the passage of time is not near as important as knowing when things happened. 6 months ago, Jackie initiated her project to take over all the popcorn distributors in Chicago.
Because she knew the drama was coming and she wanted to have the market on people going.
Yep. And so, knowing how much time has passed betwixt then and now is more important than knowing where you are in time as opposed, so having hard set time like that, especially in like in a Discord server where you've got, more than your average table worth of players at, playing, and you can have mechanisms in place that'll keep track of that stuff for you, like bots and stuff. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Because I don't have to keep track of it. The bot does that. Get the fuck out of here. But in your table game, why would you put that on? Why would you put that evil on yourself, Ricky Bobby?
Mine was because I'd taken a 20-year break and I came back rusty as shit, and I learned my lesson very quickly not to do that ever again.
Yeah, I've attempted it. One time there was a story reason for me to keep track, and I think we covered 6 weeks of in-game time over the course of a year.
Yeah.
Real world time. And then I was like, never again. Never again. No.
It slows down really quickly.
It really does. And it's really not what I'm interested in doing. So it was like, okay, memo to me, never again have something where I would have to track it like that. Like Mickey said, like it's more important to know, like, okay, it's been about this long since this event. And so therefore
what
this
season
other
is
thing
it,
can happen. Yeah, is it winter? Is it summer? Is it whatever? If there's a big celestial event, like you don't need to count down to it unless it's like, okay, well, at this point, it's a big celestial event in 2 months. And so y'all have 60 days before everything explodes or whatever.
If I want to do that amount of bookkeeping, I'll go back and play Starfleet Battles again.
Next question, or does anybody else have
anything to add to it?
The only thing I could say is if you're trying to cover a year in 10 episodes, 10 sessions, you need to have clear moments. That's the focus. I'm right there with Mickey. It's that focus on the moments. And it's been this long since that happened, a moment. And you're going to have to track it through that. Not necessarily the passage of time, but the passage of what the players have done. And
yeah, because it seems to me you would really not want to let the players get carried away with minute little day-to-day bullshit because
unless the players enjoy. Some players enjoy.
Players often sometimes enjoy that, but you really got to be strict about that because if you're wanting to pace your time out like that, you've got timelines you got to meet.
Yeah,
I will say 2 seasons of Windy City, 20 episodes. Maybe 6 months has passed total since they were given the domain.
Yeah.
And if you think about it this way, when are you aware of passage of time in a movie? When there's a bomb that's about to go off and you're watching the counter click down.
Right.
Other than that, it's like, is it a new day? Who gives a shit?
Who gives a shit?
If it doesn't serve the narrative, why are you bothering?
Yeah. And the only reason I count time in certain things is if I bring out player hooks for different things my players could do and they choose one, but they completely ignore the others. I'm like, well, this stuff is going to be still going down while that happens. So, you're going to come back from saving Princess Esther from this Tower of Terror, and there's going to be this goblin named Gareth the Black that's taken over the city and is siege engineering this giant town because
never leave a goblin alone.
Never.
Don't.
That goes back to the whole streamed format thing is when you're doing a streamed game and we keep ours, we don't want 3-4 hour episodes. We keep them 2.5. We like right around 2.5 is where we aim for. You have to make a choice about what scenes are important to show, what scenes are the best scenes to show, and which ones that the players may, had an idea to do, but they end up on the cutting room floor and have to be glossed over because there's only so much time in an episode and you can't have one person dominate an episode. So in a stream format, that's one of the decisions you have to make is which ones are the most impactful to the story to show. And sometimes those events that happen off screen, you get a few lines about it. It's talked about. that they mentioned they've been doing it, but you don't want to show it on screen because it takes up too much time. It's like the feeding question in Vampire. I could have a whole episode where all the players did was feed.
Yeah.
Go out hunting.
You have 6 players. It takes 20 minutes per hunt.
Yeah. I mean, there you go. But would that be engaging to watch? No. But is it engaging to watch if somebody botches a hunting roll and gets a messy crit or a bestial failure? Well, yeah, now it's gotten exciting.
Because failures are fun.
Failures are fun.
This question was specifically about like how do you get through a year in 10 episodes, wasn't it? Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And it's basically
then
the
easy-
format of time in a lot of things.
An easy way to do that specifically is just have one episode a month and skip like your least favorite months, like February and June.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do, okay, so I think I know where you're going with this, is you have a plot line that is supposed to take a year, okay? What you do is you build to a climactic event that your characters then have to recover from. And in that downtime where you can skip time is where you take the time skip, they recover, they friggin' Sam takes, 7 points of aggravated damage and needs to recover from that. That's going to take a real long time if you go strictly by the book rules. And, have that time skip occur where your players or where your characters are recovering and resupplying, things like that, taking care of all the logistical stuff that goes along with that, and then rejoin the action when there's action to be shown.
Mm-hmm.
Or look at the Windy City intermissions between season 1 and 2. They ended season 1. They hadn't even got a club built yet. Season 2 starts up and the club's made.
Yeah.
That was a time skip.
As a time skip.
A big one because you don't get a club instantly built.
No, that
but
takes months.
do we want to watch everyone building a club?
No. Okay, so next question is from Rolling Cade. Again, he plays Lamar Cade on Windy City After Dark. What's the strangest, funniest player action or idea that you've turned into a storyline? I'm going to go first on this only because I cannot answer this question due to potential spoilers for Monster Hearts. So you'll just have to tune into Monster Hearts to see what I might be not spoiling.
Trying to think, this craziest player action or suggestion that turned into a whole storyline?
Strangest or
So-
funniest?
Strangest that turned into a whole storyline.
So the first one that pops into my head is in my Star Wars game. One of my players said, and this was Old Republic, so think KOTOR time frame. Part of one of the things that I had introduced into the meta, because who knows what the heck is going on back then. Well, that's one of the reasons I like that setting, is because I can kind of inject my own meta or my own sort of ideas into the meta. And one of the things was that the Emperor had a personal guard, and one of the characters wanted to be a former member of that personal guard. And I said, no, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Yes, I do. Okay. And that character basically became the punching bag for, somebody who could reach across the galaxy and hurt you with their brain. And that became sort of it was almost Malkavian in its execution, because it would literally be, in the middle of this fight, you suddenly get a mind bullet fired at you from across the galaxy, and you take, this amount of damage, and you are now feared. And they would just be like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "You asked for this."
Those are famous words right there. Well, you asked for it. Players should always think about what they're asking for,
Yeah.
because they don't always think of all the end results of what they're asking for. They only think of the initial part and don't think of the actual chain of events that go with it. Anyone else got some? I've got one now because Relin pointed one out to me, which I'll bring up.
I also have one, so I'll let you decide as the Shanky McStabber. So
Go ahead.
okay. This is less of a plot line that went anywhere specific and more just proved to an entire table of young high school nerds that D&D is full of possibilities. There is a magic item in 5th edition. I'm sure Devin will know it well as many others here. It is called an endless decanter of water.
Oh, that's not just from 5th edition, buddy.
Yeah, that's not 5e.
Okay, cool. Then
That's
it's
been
got some
around
great
a long
history.
damn time. That was in 1st edition.
Mhm.
And in 5th edition, you could choose what intensity the geyser of water firing out of it. It's like, the strength of a hose, the strength of like a fountain of some sort, and the strength of a fucking geyser. And one of my players, they're like chasing this guy down. He's like, wait a minute. It's the strength of a geyser. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what it says. He's like, okay. I pointed at the ground. And I watched this motherfucker launch him with a water rocket. And I had to sit there for probably half a minute just staring at him like, you bastard. How
Just
dare you
remember,
use a
there's
thing I gave
backward thrust on him, too.
Water
Oh, no,
can
he
flow or it can crash.
He took quite a lot of damage on the landing, but he got ahead of the thing they were chasing, and then he just stood in the way. But he didn't care about the damage. He just wanted to see if he could launch himself using the propulsion of a geyser. So it's less about a storyline going somewhere and more just showing, hey, use the tools that you are given and use them well.
Reminds me
So-
of the
You
old
mentioned
fat
that-
special.
That decanter. We had a player who wondered what would happen if one was left running inside a portable hole, and how long, when you opened the portable hole, how much water would come pouring out of the portable hole the next time it was opened.
See, I think maybe the idea of magic items just make people a little chaotic.
And that's how we
Anyways.
got antediluvians.
Exactly.
I'll bring up the one that Relena points out that she decided to blackmail a prince in DC by Night because her favorite Toreador had sired without permission, and the prince had known about this. And one of the,
Because of the prince's actions.
well, but that doesn't matter about that. Is that when the prince finds out you sired without permission, it's pretty clear you didn't have permission. The child, at a minimum, is destroyed. And if you're not useful to the prince, odds are you're destroyed too for doing it. I mean, if you're useful, they don't normally throw a tool away. But in this case, he had decided he was going to destroy both of them, and Relin blackmailed him. And that led to a whole storyline of him trying to get revenge and firebombing their club, making it look like an arson, but he lacked information to make it properly look like an arson. That there was a bunch of arsons going on at the time, but he lacked the key piece of information that would make it match the rest, which was the arsons were being done with blood sorcery and not being done with gasoline. And by him using gasoline, it made it quite clear it was not the same perpetrator, which led a whole direction that the story branched off with, in the end, she got a prince removed for his dickish actions.
And his entire line of descendants.
Yeah, well, he was a serial, as he would put it, there's not any problem he can't solve with liberal use of explosives and fire. And the Camarilla takes a very dim view of princes who blow people up, because blowing people up is rather obvious, and it attracts the attention that you don't want, especially in DC, where anyone using explosives in DC attracts attention you don't want. It's just not good.
Yeah, so Vampire's a great game for players coming up with great, funny, or crazy shit that will lead to story.
Windy City Season 1, the whole Sabbat guy in your domain, that only came about because Lamar goes to the jazz club and says he looks around to see if he sees any strange symbols on the wall.
Yeah.
And it went from him looking for strange symbols on the wall to, hey, look, yeah, there's an old Sabbat pack symbol on the wall. And that led to that whole storyline in the first season.
Mm-hmm.
That was all because Lamar asked about if he saw a symbol.
Yeah.
Because he rolled enough successes. I got to give him something. You don't say, no, you didn't find anything. Reward successes in your game. You roll enough successes, fucking make something up. Give him something and roll with it. And it became half the season.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to add?
I'll just say I'm not going to say what's in my mind because I know that a couple of my players in my current games are watching, and I don't want to spoil things. You're welcome,
But
guys.
this also, by the way, this also applies to NPCs that do things, because I'm going to give this teaser for Windy City. Sun was playing with proverbial fire by trying to put the whammy on Eleanor, and it was perfectly in character for Sun. But Sun has to operate in a knowledge vacuum, and that knowledge vacuum is regarding Eleanor's sire. So it applies to storylines pop up from people doing dumb shit, and even the NPCs have that problem.
Oh, yeah.
Luke and Jackie.
Oh, yeah. Because Luke in season 3, y'all going to see he's going to get fucked. And not in the fun way.
So, yeah, that
Y'all
doesn't
have
apply
seen
just
a
to the
Primogen
players, let me tell you.
Tentacle?
All right. Anyone else?
I think for me, I've had funniest moments in D&D. I think Vampire for me is a little bit more serious. There was one instance where I had a room of just 2 animated armors that are really simple once you really get through their tough AC. And my players were not playing as a team, and so they were struggling with these 2 things that are really like CR half, I think. And so one of them gets the bright idea to just kind of run over and see if there's anything else to use against them in the other room. And in the other room, I had 2 animated rugs. And so now they have this whole ordeal that they've built into themselves. And there's a bunch of puns flying around. But at the end of it, they ended up opening all the rooms and just animating everything that was in there as one moment. I was just like, why would you do this? Like, why on God's green earth would
Chaos
you be
Gremlins.
like, let's open everything? Fuck it.
Because there's a big red button, and players love to push the big red button.
You remind me of a story about my brother. We were playing D&D back in the day, and they were before a magistrate because they'd been fucking around. And the magistrate started reading the list of charges, and my brother, he had his character just scream out, "I object." So the magistrate had the guards drag him outside, beat the shit out of him, drug him back in unconscious, laid him back in the chair, and continued the thing. And of all of them to get locked up was my brother, which turned the whole story into how are we going to get him out of the jail after he said, "I object." That was all he said. But it turned into a whole story of them having to try to get him out of jail because you don't mouth off to a magistrate in a city like these. It just doesn't end well.
Okay. Bolthra asks, what do you think of crossover games, such as Werewolf crossed with Wraith, Mage crossed with Vampire? They can be hard to run, is what Bolthra says.
I'm going to go with this one on first because I've made my opinions clear on this. I do not allow players to cross-splat with their characters. You will not have a Wraith player or a Werewolf player in my Vampire game. You will not have a Vampire player in my Wraith game. Now, that being said, as the storyteller, I will use Wraiths and Vampires and Mages and Changelings in my Vampire game. I will use all that shit. I love to do it. But the power balance on the player character side is not right. And you can't put one of these in and cross-splat player-wise without some serious balancing problems. And I'm big on, at the start at least, everyone should have the same opportunity to make the same level of character. It's just a matter of what they've made, and you shouldn't put, a brand new coterie of vampires with a werewolf because there's a power imbalance there that it's not right. So yeah, I don't cross-spat players, but you'll sure as hell see a lot of shit from all of them in my World of Darkness games. And you'll even see some Chronicles of Darkness shit get thrown in once in a while because fuck it, I'm a storyteller, I can do that.
Mm-hmm. For me personally, it's always mages. Mages break games faster than anything else. Cross-splatting mage is not possible. I've tried it. It doesn't work. Just with the unlimited potential that a mage has, it's too volatile, and it makes the power imbalance, right? What Shanky said, the power imbalance is just too great. I've done plenty of things where you've got vampires, changelings, and stuff like that, and there are some ways to mitigate, but it just doesn't function as well as you want it to.
Other people?
I personally, I can think of an example of when I would 1000% do a cross splat. If you play a fish milk, a portal will open up in reality and a TIE fighter will come flying out of it, crashing into you and destroying you.
Yeah, we at McStabber Studios are not big fans of the fish milks.
Yeah, actually, Devin and Verlin, both who sat in on my application process for Windy City, know you were told right off, if you try to fish milk my table, you won't make one episode. I will kill you in the first episode you appear in. Period. I don't play fish milks. If you play a Malkavian that disrespects mental illness, I will destroy you first episode. That is not tolerated. It may be your story, but there's certain story threads I will not tell and I will not deal with. And those are the two biggest offenders that will end immediately. Matter of fact, Devin is the only one who applied for Windy City who came up with a concept for a Malkavian that I felt could be played.
In V5, especially in V5, if you drop a mage, a wraith, a fairy, or a werewolf, you've got stats for that in the back of the book. And it's kind of balanced. The biggest problem you're going to run into is balancing issues. And, when you're trying to bring stuff from previous editions, it's easier to bring stuff from previous editions into V5 than it is to take stuff from V5 into previous editions. And if you're going to throw that stuff, you can't. Your PCs can't play that in V5, because it's just you're not only that, but the meta doesn't work. Like your vampires with a werewolf in your coterie, negative. That werewolf is going to die quick, fast, in a hurry because every other werewolf in existence is going to hunt them down and kill them for betraying Gaia, and yada yada yada. Like there's a argument about what can you do in your own world of darkness versus, and yeah, if you really want to do it. Me personally, I stand on the shoulders of giants. The stories I tell are based on this meta, and there are some parts that I don't pay attention to, like the Swords of Heimdall. For those of you who know what they are, you know what they are. They're dead. There's a lot of stuff that you can cross over, but go ahead.
Yeah, bouncing off of what you were saying, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think that the books exist as they exist for a reason. Like they've never produced books that were like, hey, here's how you can play a werewolf in a vampire game, or here's how you can play a vampire in a werewolf game. Like they're self-contained monsters.
Yes.
They can exist in each other's mythologies, sure, but to really kind of like if you want to play a mage and run around with a group of werewolves, you're going to hate life, because the second one of them transforms, Paradox is going to go, hey, buddy, that's not supposed to happen. Here's a nice little shiv right in your fucking side. And then if the whole pack transforms, it's like, you might as well just go on the floor and lay in your quiet for the next year.
I will say, on the shoulders of giants, would I do something like Jason Carl did with Strikes Accord, where Jason Charles Miller was a guest player? I could see doing that, because that wasn't him playing in the coterie. He was a guest player. He was a person who was representing an NPC in Jason Carl's game, and it was for an episode. That was perfect. You can do that, because it's still the same as an NPC. It's just given to someone to play. I would go that far. That's about as far as I'll cross splat.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a big Jason Charles Miller fan anyway, and if he wants to be a werewolf in my fucking vampire game, anytime he wants to, he can sit right at my table as a werewolf for an episode as a guest. And
but
he's
cool played vampire too.
Yeah, I know.
And what it boils down to is does it fit the canon? Because
right.
Even something as simple as that, it was the entire reason that Glasswalker, who are known to do whatever it takes to survive, working with a group of leeches from his perspective, yeah, that's totally within the realm
He
of
was
possibility
Bonar.
for Bonar. What did I say?
Glasswalker. He was
I
Bonar.
meant okay, yeah. I meant Bonar, but
Semantics.
yeah, semantics. I'm always up for semantics.
I always love antics.
But it totally fit within the established canon.
Right.
And as soon as that door was open, where was he? Pew!
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that type of scenario works. But again, the question of whether or not you're going to have it in your coterie as a main player.
No. It just doesn't work. The power creep between the splats is so significant, and they just don't mix well.
It's obvious they weren't meant to be mixed.
Right.
I mean, the other types of supernatural creatures are meant to be antagonists to the one you're playing, not part of the protagonist to the one you're playing.
Right.
So if you're playing vampire, all the other supernaturals are the antagonists to that, not the protagonist.
They're all the enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a mage in your coterie, there is no chantry in the world that can stop you from walking in there and taking their shit.
If their magic even works. Being around vampires.
Paradox gets to
Technically,
be a
it
problem.
would, but that's getting into minutia.
Yeah, because the other thing I've noticed with the World of Darkness is even though they didn't intend, for like, oh, you're playing the Changeling in our circle coterie pack, whatever the fuck we are, and it's just no. But I've seen first they did truly build a World of Darkness, and so all the splats have interacted historically. But each splat also has different descriptions for what these things are. Like in Werewolf, vampires aren't, the descendants of Cain to them. Vampires are another version of corruption that we have to deal with.
They're
Yay.
agents of the worm.
Or changelings, and I'll use vampires again. Vampires are a walking banality, and they drain the life and vivaciousness out of the changeling world by existing in it. That's all they have to do. And so their theories about what each splat is to their knowledge is always going to be different. Like, I'm pretty sure in some of the splats, changelings are fucking evil to certain things, like
Demon breaks all
mages
of them.
or whatever.
I mean, Demon just breaks all of it. Just fucking shatters it.
The powers of demon are meant to be those deals with the devil, and so of course they're going to be powerful because in that mythology the devil can do a fuck ton of shit.
That's the thing, is they're great. I love reading all the splats, but putting them together, no.
Okay, so last question that we have from viewers is from Phantom Trickster 1, which is he plays Braxton Rutherford in our Darker Waters serial campaign that is currently on hiatus. It's a 7th Sea campaign that streams on Tuesdays, usually once a month, but right now it is on hiatus.
Get well soon, Tam.
Yeah, get well soon, Tam. What criteria do you have for picking the systems you want to play? I'll go first. I like ease. I like easy systems that I don't have to, have a whole book in front of me to reference rules when players have questions.
Mine's odd. I will run any system. I pick a system based on, do I have an idea that is not something I've seen before? So for Windy City, the idea behind it for me was you always see a coterie's already formed. Because the session 0 by the book talks about how you became a coterie and, that gelling, you always see one form. So for Windy City, it was based on, well, how is a coterie formed? What happens if you take 6 kindred and say you're a coterie now, live with it? For Wraith, it was, what happens if I start them alive and they know nothing about being a Wraith and I kill them the first episode? So all of my games is based off of trying to do something that I don't see anyone else doing. And that's how I pick the systems. Demon, nobody runs Demon. I mean, there's a couple streams, but it is not one you see often. Zasarkala, I've never seen a Zasarkala stream. So I pick my game solely on, is a bunch of other people doing it? No. Okay. Are other people doing it? Yeah. Can I do it in a way they're not? If I can, I'll run it. Because I want to do something different than everyone else. Even if I use the same game, I want to do it in a different way.
I'll actually expand a little on mine because it's not just the ease of the system, but that is a big priority for me because if it's overly complicated, my brain is just not going to absorb it and it ain't going to stick. But I will say that I also I lean towards indie games because I feel like the indies really do produce some great quality games out there if you can find them. And that they basically tell some really great stories with these, small games that they produce. And so I look at indie games and then I look for settings and general premise of the game that really seems interesting to me. Like I said earlier in the stream today, that I like to play games that touch on sensitive or tough topics. And allows players to explore those in a safe and fun way, where they feel empowered to be able to deal with things that they have maybe experienced in their life, and now they have the power to actually do something about it.
I'm a big lore junkie. Like if something has a lot of lore behind it, I love. I'll gravitate more towards it. Like I keep harping on Legend of the Five Rings, but it's just so well curated and taken care of. Before
that's your jam. Harp on it, man. Harp on it. It's your jam.
Before it was bought over by a Fantasy Flight. Like it was just heavily curated. People loved it. It was very well taken care of. But I'm also like a world builder, so I'll love to just sit there and kind of come up with the minutia of the day to day, what's going on and stuff like that. So it is, I kind of lean towards what you do, Shank, where it's just like, is anybody doing this? No. How can I do it then? That's where I lean towards. It's like, how can I bring more eyes to a game system that might not get the reverence or the attention that it needs to get?
The Wraith, man. And look at how many people have joined this wonderful community because of the Wraith game. Maddox right there is one of them who came just because he saw Wraith.
Scared shitless about the first time I tried to join Zoom with you guys. I thought I was like hopping in with a bunch of scammers and shit or something.
Nope.
But
We're just normal people.
And then he fanboyed a little.
We are just normal people that happen to stream games.
Mm-hmm.
I can piggyback off of Ravnos there, but as long as a game can hook into one of my already previous interests, I can usually get into it pretty easily. Like I mentioned City of Mist, modern fantasy in any way, shape, or form, powers, mythology. Oh my God. Checked off so many boxes in 3 seconds of me reading the elevator pitch. Or like D&D, I said fantasy, just as long as you can find a hook that actually grabs you about a game, you can play / run it. Easy. You can truly find any sort of enjoyment as long as you can tell that you would be invested in the game.
Yeah, similar for me. When I look at a thing, it's like, well, is the setting and or the concept of the game interesting to me? Like, does it grab me? And bonus points if you've got a lot of lore and big world building and stuff that I can dig into and then have approximate knowledge of most of it. That's kind of where I go. And then from there, you can kind of break it down to, okay, how does the system work? Do I need to, adjust it for my style? But that's the main thing for me is it interesting? Does it play into interests I already have? Is it something, ooh, I never thought of that. Let's do that. And also, if I'm reading like about a system or I'm looking into something and then I immediately get an idea of, ooh, this would be a really fun story to play in this setting or whatever. And then it's like, okay, we'll just put a little part on our list for that system.
I did exactly that reading Eclipse Phase. When I read the rule book for Eclipse Phase about, sleeving different bodies and backing up your memories and everything. Because as soon as I read the rule book, I'm like, well, what happens if you wake up in from a backup of yourself going, how did I die? What happened? Why am I restored from a backup missing, 2 months of time? What happened in that intervening 2 months? And eventually I'm going to run an Eclipse Phase around that idea of that all the players in the group wake up with a 2-month gap from a restored backup of their memories and their consciousness, going, where did I lose 2 months? What happened that they couldn't restore me from that? Why am I suddenly on an old backup of myself? Is there another one of me running around? As you read the rules and you're like, wait a minute, and an idea pops and you're like, damn, there's an idea.
There's nothing more infectious in the human mind than a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
It's quite literally about if I take a read of the back and it sounds interesting, and then I pick it up and then I read it some more and I go from there. So I would just be reiterating on what Ravnos, Maddox, and Devin have said.
Yeah, it's does this inspire something?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Period, bottom
Yeah.
line in a story. Does this inspire in me a story to tell?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If it does, Bob's your uncle.
Yep.
If it doesn't,
Put it
put
back.
that back.
Put it back.
Bob's your uncle if it does. Sue's your aunt if it doesn't.
But basically, you know, and really the whole point of this whole panel this evening was just to let you know that, you know, playing games, whatever format you play them in, whether it's, you know, a home game that's, of course, due to current situations that we've been dealing with for the past year plus, has now gone to online, either through Discord voice or through Zoom or Google Meet or whatever your platform is that you use to meet with your friends to play games. Or if you're playing it through Discord or other forum-based play-by-post, you know, all that kind of stuff. Or if you're streaming a game, every type of format is completely valid. There are some challenges and perks to each. And really we just wanted to share how we do things and answer your questions about how we do things so that you know that you are fully capable of doing it too. And that, you know, we're all just here to have fun and we want you to have fun too.
And I got one more thing I want to go around the table as we're going to leave before we end this today. And it's advice for anyone wanting to pick up storytelling or running a dungeon master, game master, whatever. Not a whole list of advice, but just everybody give one thing to advice. And I'm going to give mine first because I'm Shanky. I can do that. Mine's pretty simple. Watch all these streams that you see out there. Watch, you know, the Critical Roles. Watch B-Dave. Watch Roll For It, Silence of Shadows. Watch McStabber Studios. Watch Tam Shoe's Haunted Chronicles. Watch all these games. Watch what they do as a storyteller at running a game and look at what they're doing and decide what works for you, what you think you like about their method of doing it, what you think doesn't work for you, and adapt it to your own style. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to watch these other people for tips and to see whether you're looking for it in terms of, I like what they're doing there, I don't like that over there. Watch it, figure out what works for you, adapt it to your own style, and make it your style. I did it. And, you know, don't be afraid to do it. Because for most of us here that started this way back in the day, streaming wasn't a thing. We didn't get tips by watching someone else. We had to learn it the hard way through trial and error. Now you have the option to watch people do it and figure out what you think would work for you and adapt that to yourself. And there's my advice for new storytellers, DMs, GMs, anyone wanting to break into it.
I'm going to bounce right off of that because that's excellent advice. And I would say, yes, do that. But also, like sub-point piece of advice to that is if there's something you really like that another storyteller or DM or GM does that you just can't do either because you just don't have the practice with it yet, or you're just not good at it. Like if you can't do voices, or you're not you don't do the homebrew coming up with things on the fly, or you're not very good at improvisation or whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. Don't let that stop you from doing it. Like you don't need to do the voices of your NPCs. You don't need to. It's okay. You can practice it if you want to and get better, but you don't need to. You don't need to do all of the things, even if you like it. But practice,
you don't have
but
to
don't
be Matt Mercer
discouraged.
to see things he does that you do like and to adapt it. You don't have to be him.
Yeah.
And really, my little bit of advice as the newest of the storytellers here in this group is to recognize the anxieties you have Try to minimize that voice as much as you can in your head and just push through it and do it. Because once you do it the first time, it's so much easier the second time. Let me tell you. Also, I will say if you are new to streaming, don't be afraid to watch, especially if you're live streaming, watch your VOD. Pay attention to what you did as an ST or GM. Pay attention, because you may find that like your pacing was off, or there might be some things that you could tweak in the next time you run that game so that you can be better. And you're not being hypercritical of yourself. You're just paying attention and seeing where you were weaker and where you need to strengthen yourself. And that's what you can focus on. And also, always ask for feedback from your players and take it constructively. Don't get offended if they tell you something that they think you could improve, because if they feel like that they can give you that advice to improve on something, they want you to be better. They want you to be amazing. And so they're trying to help you be amazing. And also if they say, oh no, everything was great, that's fine. Then you're going to watch your VOD and you'll find your own little mistakes and you'll fix them yourself. Because that happened with me with Bluebeards. All my players are like, oh, that was awesome. No problems. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I go back and watch. I'm like, yeah, my pacing was way off. But no, really. And you know, another thing I'll say as a new ST or a new GM, I'm not an ST. I haven't run a World of Darkness system yet, and I don't actually yet. I know I say yet, but it's probably going to be some time before I do, just because it is a complicated system. But I will say, if you have the opportunity to get experience playing the systems or similar games based on the systems you're looking at running, please get in there and play it. Get familiar with the system. I actually played in a few one-shots that were powered by Apocalypse before I ran my first Powered by the Apocalypse game. And that helped a lot because I understood the core mechanics of it before I ran it.
My advice, and it comes down to one simple phrase: dare to suck. You're gonna be bad. It's gonna happen. You gotta get past that hurdle and move towards and work on your improvements, work on what you think you didn't do so well, you know, all that stuff. That is part of the process of just doing something new. And the reason I always love the phrase dare to suck is I heard it from an Aerosmith interview. And what it was is that every week they would come in with their song ideas. It didn't matter if they were terrible or garbage or whatnot. You just had to come in with something. And that's how we got Love in an Elevator and things like that. I know that's not
that's
the
fantastic.
best song, but, you know, it's just, please, come
that
on.
song sold a lot of records.
Yeah,
I know.
It's that fail forward concept that, you know, we learn by our failures. That's where we learn.
Exactly.
We don't learn by our successes nearly as much as we learn by our failures. So be brave and fail, because you're going to. And in some way, some shape, or some form, you're going to fail at something, and you're going to learn from that.
God, anyone who has sat with me in a Zoom and heard me talk about some of my feelings on DC by Night will hear that, yeah. Wasn't my best work.
Maddox, do you have any advice for someone looking to possibly start running home games?
Oh, I have a lot, and then y'all said half of them. So,
You're welcome.
here, I will give a counter to that. Yes, always commit to what you're doing, because failing is just as good as succeeding. It's just different end. But on the flip side, and still the same coin of that advice, you're better than you think. You can do some miraculous things when you didn't even realize that you had the ability to. Like the first game of D&D I ran, I was such a nervous wreck, I nearly burst into tears at the table. Because I was just so crippled and scared of messing up someone's fun that I didn't think, okay, well, if I'm not having fun, none of my players are going to have fun either, because they'll be able to feel it just from how I'm acting for them. And so understand that, yes, there will be plenty of places where you fall flat on your face. You'll taste blood. It's bad. But there's just as many places where it is so easy for you to get this going, to get this started, to introduce that plot twist you weren't expecting. And they're like, wait a minute, where the fuck did that come from? It came from you. You might have been inspired by something you saw, but it came from you. So here, to be way too Disney about it, the power was within you all along. So use that motherfucker.
Oh.
Mickey.
All right, I've got like 3. Number 1, if you haven't before, let me phrase it like this: not everyone is Shanky. Not everyone can claim the ability to be able to improv off the top of their head every last little thing. Take a creative writing course, or a narrative structure course, or just look it up on YouTube or whatever. I mean, shit, there's videos for everything up there, and learn about introductions, rising actions, climaxes, resolutions, endings. That'll help you as you craft your narratives, because that's ultimately what you're doing, is you're narrating. Number 2, tropes are not bad. Tropes are there because they work. The M. Night freaking Shyamalan. Okay, so yeah, twists for the express purpose of shock value suck. Twists for the purpose of building suspense.
Let me go back to the Shanky twist. Yes, they're not done for shock value.
Twists that are done for the purpose of building suspense.
That are narratively appropriate.
Fit the established canon, and make the narrative better rather than just completely subverting the entire narrative. Learn about proper plot twists as opposed to shock value.
Yeah.
And number 3, your players are going to have limits. Your players are going to have, things that they don't want to do. You need to recognize those. You also need to recognize your own boundaries and your own limits. And that, because I had a player one time who, a situation didn't work out well for them and they didn't get what they wanted. And so they spent the next 15 minutes bitching and complaining about not getting what they wanted. And okay, not everything is going to work out for you 100% of the time. Sometimes you are not involved in the penultimate or the critical moment. You will have your own critical moment. Stop trying to be the only star in the sky. We are all stars. And a single star shines very dimly at a distance. But when you get a bunch of them together, what do?
Shine brighter.
That's right. And it is a collaborative process. And if you are, one of the things, don't be that guy. And learn as an ST, learn where your limits are and be willing to say no to a player.
That's tough for a lot of players, people running games.
That is.
Yeah. I was about to strangle you if you had taken my idea, because everybody took all the ideas that I had come up with. And you were like, I got 3. Fuck everybody else. But nobody said write it down. The greatest lie we tell ourselves is that we will remember something, and we fucking won't.
Let me make a note.
You never write shit down.
So write shit down. I will very often the next day sit down and watch the VOD of what I did and just write down anything that I might have missed, things that I might have been in the moment, like Shanky has been, and just like, oh, I made this note, or I called this person that name, or I used this accent, and now I have to stick with it. It's important that you take notes, I think. So.
And now we're going to have to wrap this up because one of our panelists has to go in about 11 minutes. And hopefully our outros aren't 11 minutes this time. We're going to see. Before we go into the outro, if anyone here at the table has something they're doing that they want to hype out, please do this now. I know Devin's not streaming anywhere else. She's pretty much with Windy City for season 3. Verlin's got one. She's got a Monster Heart, which she'll probably talking about with the schedule, I think. Ravinia, you in any other shows right now? on any other
I'm
channels?
Not on any other channels. I do mod work for Covenant, the Alchemist, and he has a spy game that runs on Sundays.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Danger and Call of Cthulhu.
oh yeah. Call of Cthulhu. Why my brain is mush.
Yep.
I haven't eaten. But yes, I am in Tiss's Call of Cthulhu game, the London Esoteric Society, that is on this channel on Saturdays. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be crazy. Thank you, Mickey.
Then we got Maddox, which we know where he's about to be, don't we, Maddox?
Hello, I am Maddox. I will be one of said players going through old high school trauma in Monster Hearts with Relin. And I have no other projects. I am not a streamer. I don't know, available where books are sold.
You're not a streamer yet.
Yet. Give you time. You'll get bitten by the bug too.
Mickey?
Oh, gee. All right. I've got Monster Hearts coming up. We film our first episode this Thursday. It will air next Wednesday at 8 p.m. 7 Central. I'm in Sudbury by night, which streams at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 Central on Saturdays. And
that's on Spectre Elefet's channel.
Yep. Archives of the
this is
Dragon.
on Archives of the Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for reminding me to pump the channel.
And the storyteller on that is the amazing Unconscious Celestial.
Oh,
Mm-hmm. she's amazing.
She's wonderful. And finally, because I want to hype it, is June 6th is V-Day. Season 3, Episode 1. Be there or be square.
And Will?
I am looking forward to Monster Hearts before anything else. And then I'm looking forward to the Mage game that I'm going to be running on this channel as well. And if there's anything that has interested you for Vampire, Legend of the Five Rings, or Star Wars, you can catch that on my channel otherwise. But I am
There's a link
Mage.
in chat right now.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Mage is where my current gaming boner is at right now.
And if you like what we're doing here, of course, feel free. You can subscribe to the channel. Give us a follow here on Twitch. If you're watching this on YouTube, of course, subscriptions are free. Go ahead, give us one of those. So you know, subscriptions, they go to the channel, but bits and donations always go to the players you're seeing in the stream. It's one of the ways we give back to the people that are playing with us. We don't do this to make money because, as anyone on our Discord knows, it's not a money-making proposition, but we do like to give back to the players in some way. Speaking of Discord, of course, pop over to the Discord. We cast our shows from the Discord. And actually, we also cast new storytellers from the
our
Discord
too.
So it's a great community. Please join up with it and join us over there because we got a great group and we try to spread the love around over there. We've got merchandise. Really, it's pretty much Windy City After Dark merchandise. But, you know, go ahead, check it out. We're going to have some new Season 3 merchandise because the amazing Combustion Girl has given us some new stuff to put for Season 3. Mm-hmm. And she's amazing and we love her. Courtesy of Devin, who brought her over to our community, which, you know.
Thank you.
Because she's amazing. I'm going to let Relin do the schedule because that's she does the schedule. I'm bad at schedules.
Yep. So while Tamshu is in his recovery period, he is on hiatus for his streams that he normally runs on Tuesday evenings on our channel. So during the week, we do not have any streams this week. And Saturday will be London Esoteric Society Session 2 because there was an issue where it had to be rescheduled from this previous Saturday. So that will be airing. And basically, they solved one little creepy mystery, and now they're going to be looking into some other unusual things going on in Victorian London.
Yep. Call of Cthulhu, get your cock.
Call of Cthulhu, yes. Get your cock. And that's
he says he hates puns, but
I know, right?
But it's dirty. I like dirty.
It's cockless, LES, you know, cockless. Yeah. But you're so welcome. But anyway, that's at 3 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. And then on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Shanky will actually be doing a story so far, a recap live on Twitch 5 p.m. Eastern for our Windy City After Dark Chronicle. He will be summarizing seasons 1 and 2 during that stream. So if you have questions about things that happened in season 1 and 2, tune in on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And then basically the coming up week after that, we've got Monster Hearts starting on Wednesday, the June 2nd. That's going to be
I
at
can't wait
8
to see the
p.m.
craziness because I have not even seen the session 0. I've just listened to my wife cackling as they're going through it. So that tells me that it's apparently pretty funny.
The
and it's pretty
first
good.
half was like 4 hours. The second half was like 3.
And that was session 0.
That was session 0 for a freaking Powered by the Apocalypse game. We had so much fun together.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to that too, because even though I'm Shanky McStabber, I haven't seen the session 0. I haven't seen any of it because I'm not in it. That is a solely run by Relyn game. She's doing the tech and everything.
Legit, all 3 guys down on the bottom row are in my game, y'all.
Troublemakers. Every last one of them sus as hell. And in the immortal words of Chops, who's not in the stream with us, but we all love Chops. Mental health, it's no joke. It's no laughing matter. Please take your mental health seriously and check in on friends, check in on your family. Please check in on your loved one. Check in on those that are close to you and make sure they're okay. Please don't assume they're okay because a lot of us aren't. And if you are someone who suffers from mental health issues, like I myself do, don't be afraid to reach out if you need help. If you need to talk to somebody, please don't feel you're a burden on them. Don't feel you're troubling them. Please reach out to them because we all need each other in this world, and none of us can do it alone. And if you're one of those people and you don't really feel you have friends to talk to, please look over in the chat. There's a number of numbers that you can call or text to reach out to various support lines to get the help you need, because we're only here for a limited time. And while we're here for that time, you need to live life to the fullest, and you need to take care of yourself. Self-care is very important.
And as a nurse, I'll be the nicest mean nurse you've ever met if you get to know me in Discord. Protect yourself and others. Go get your COVID vaccine.
Yes, please get your vaccine. I got my first one last week, and I'll be getting my second one on June 10th. So please get your COVID vaccine. Don't get everyone infected. But mental health is important, and we do this at the end of every stream because it's that important to us. It's right up there with consent for our channel. So I do thank you all for coming. And
thank you all so much.
This ran longer than I expected to. It's longer than our vampire streams do, but we got a good group together and had a lot of questions. So I thank you all for coming. And I thank this amazing panel for doing this with me. It was an idea I had, and I'm glad y'all made it. And thank you, everybody. And good night.
Good night.